This is the 96th year of the running of the great classic Paris Roubaix, and they call it the Easter race. Well, this year, Paul, it's being held on Easter Sunday. We've had 2 weeks of really bad weather here in Europe. These cobbles in places are absolutely atrocious. But Paul, you rode your best race when the weather was so bad.
I did. It was a crazy day. That was a day that Henny Kuiper won. I fell off 9 times at the end of the day. I ended up finishing 15th, and I was quite happy with that.
I would have been extremely happy with such a performance. You know, there certainly are riders who are made for Paris Roubaix. Riders like Jan Ullrich, the winner of the Tour de France last year, he wouldn't come to a race like this, but there are those who relish these conditions, right?
There certainly are. Some riders actually dream about having a wet Paris Roubaix, and the last time that happened was 1994 when, in fact, André Schmiel won, and that was an incredible day.
And of course, when Schmiel won, it was Johan Museeuw who had all the bad luck.
He certainly did. Nobody could have expected that. He was trying a new prototype machine. It had double suspension. He had problems with his pedals, and he'd raced almost up to the back wheel of André Schmiel, and he couldn't make it, and Schmiel went away with the day.
Well, Schmiel is among the favourites for the big race here, so too is Johan Museeuw after his great win in the Tour of Flanders, and watch out too for Museeuw's teammate Franco Ballerini. Well, guess what we're doing? We're doing what every club cyclist loves to do the day before the race, and that's ride the 50 kilometres or so on the cobbles and get a real feel for this event. This quiet little lane here will be jam-packed with thousands of spectators tomorrow, and I suppose 2 cars a day come down this road in normal conditions. Paul, Museeuw is the big favourite, right?
Museeuw is the #1 favourite after winning Tour of Flanders last week. André Schmiel is in great form, but I think half a dozen of the Mappé riders could walk away with the win too.
Absolutely. Well, the overall race is more than 260 kilometres. Where we are right now is approximately 50 kilometres from the finish. A nice place to attack. Well, let's go to the action now. We'll join the race, as always, outside the beautiful chateau in Compiègne, and let's talk to some of the players that make this race the real queen of the classics.
Stuart, last year both you and Henk Vogels put in a real great performance at Paris-Roubaix. It's a crazy race, but you both seem to get really motivated for it.
Both pretty crazy people. I mean, yeah, the last 3 years I've done it, it's been dry and extremely fast, and this year the first time it's going to be, it's just going to be like a mountain bike race. It's going to be pretty scary, and I think if we come down less than 5 times, we'd be pretty happy, but it's going to be a very different race this year.
You went and rode over the cobblestones a couple of times this week just to have a look at them. What were conditions really like?
We couldn't see the pave on the second section. It was under about 3 inches of water, and that's no joke. And we were trying to ride in the middle of the pave, but and Hank and I were just mucking around a little bit and just trying to overtake each other. It was virtually impossible. So today, is just going to be chaos. It's just going to be official chaos.
You should have a good chance in the final, though, because with Frédéric Moncassin, you and Henk Vogels, you could have a lot of riders there.
Well, that's the main aim for the team, is a numbers game in the end, and if it's going to be the guys who have the most riders to, set the offensive in the final 50, 60, 70 kilometres. So we've got to try and get 3 or 4 of us up there and then take it into our own hands and let them have it.
Ready for the madness?
Oh, ready as I'll ever get, I think. It's going to be great.
Frankie, everyone looks just a little bit worried this morning because of the weather conditions.
What problem? It's sunny. Now it's no problems. When you get to the cobbles, it's going to be a big mess. I heard it pouring last night. It's going to be a flood.
US Postal have quite a lot of confidence in yourself and George Hincapie for today. You've become the specialists of Paris-Roubaix over the last couple of years.
Oh, I'm not a specialist, but it's a special race. I look forward to it, and it's last race I do before I go back to America. So definitely going to put in a special effort and try to do something.
But why do you get motivated for this race? Because a lot of people say it's absolute madness. It's crazy to go out there and race over the cobblestones.
Yeah, some people think it's stupid and it's not a real race, but to others it's a different race. It's a special race. You do 100, 110 races all on the roads to the mountains. This is one race that's different and one race that stands out from the others. So it's a challenge.
You're up for it?
Today, I hope. We'll find out how the legs are in a little bit.
I'm sure they'll be just great, Frankie. Paul Sherwen now moves across to speak to André Schmiel, the winner of this race in 1994. How about the race conditions?
Oui, je pense
Well, it's
les derniers deux jours, c'est pleuvé.
the last couple of days it's rained quite a lot, and so it's going to be difficult for everyone. You rode over the cobbles Thursday. I think everybody's going to be in the same boat. It's difficult because in the final you might be the only lotto rider towards the front of the race. We'll find that out when we get there. But for the moment, I don't want to think about that. Are you worried about the conditions? Not really. I've got good physical condition. Good legs is the most important thing.
I was just talking to Frankie Andreu, and I was wondering, why is it that some riders get really motivated for a race which is almost crazy?
It's just something, for me personally, it's something I grew up watching always, and something I've always wanted to do welling. Something I feel that is suited more to my style of riding. So I always look forward to this race.
With the weather like it is today, it makes it just that little bit more special. A real hard race, and you've got to have a lot of courage to stay near the front all the time.
Yeah, with the weather today, the cobbles are going to be really slick, wet, and muddy, just the way I like them.
What's it like when you get to the end of Paris Roubaix and you ride onto the stadium there? It really must be a special moment.
Yeah, it's really, can't really explain the feeling when you come in and you make that right turn into the velodrome. You know, you just hear the crowd roaring, and it's really amazing to go into the velodrome.
And this really is a brief word with Zanini, leader of the World Cup. He doesn't speak French.
But Paris Roubaix is a question of being motivated, because it's a special race. You really have to ride, you have to want to ride.
Yeah, you can have everything, crashes, flat tire, but after that you must go everywhere, and you can come back every time. And it's like you say, you have to be very motivated when you come on the first cobblestone and you crash the first time already. If you can say, shit, I go home, but you have to go just on Paris Roubaix.
Good luck.
Okay.
Johan, today the weather conditions for Paris Roubaix are very difficult. Does it make you think back to 1994?
I did 8 times to Paris Roubaix. One time was very difficult. So this year should be also very, very bad on the cobblestone. So I think with bad weather, when it's wet, it's harder. It's also more flat tires and also more crashes.
It's very special. You have to have a lot of courage to keep coming back all the time after problems on the cobblestones. But with the Mappé team, you have a lot of strong riders to help you.
Yeah, we have a very strong team, but Paris Roubaix need a lot of luck. When you have a lot of bunches and when you crash a lot, it's difficult to stay in the front. So also when you have a strong team, it's difficult to win Paris Roubaix.
Do you worry about the cobblestones when they're in the wet conditions like this, or do you look forward to them?
I don't know so good the difference, because I did one time when it's very wet, and then I lose about Chmil. So we shall see this evening.
Hank, conditions are going to be pretty wild out there today, aren't they?
Yeah, we rode over the course the other day and it's been raining since, so I saw the VTT yesterday on the television. It scared me, but you know, if you get in the first 10, hopefully it can be all right.
Well, this is a race that you have to have a special motivation for. You have to really want to race it, and I think you do.
Oh, I live for this race, mate, and I just hope everything runs smoother. You have to have a lot of luck, but sometimes you make your own luck, and we've got a great team. I'm going to be at the front. I mean, I'm bloody motivated for this, and I want to stay at the front.
Paris Roubaix is always a hard race, but with the conditions like this, it makes it even harder, and the strong men stay at the front.
Yeah, you can say it's more individual effort, because even teams like Mappé, it's more difficult to organize, and to do a race like my boys did for me last year is also going to be difficult. So you have to rely on yourself a lot, and you have to rely still on your team that they can give you wheels in a good moment in case of punctures and stuff. So it really is you have to be, I say, you would have to be not lucky, but not unlucky. Then that's the reception for today, I think.
And Franco Ballerini here, a former winner. He knows what it's like to be beaten as well. And certainly all of those riders are sure of one thing: it's going to be a long, tough day. 266 kilometres, 27 sections of this race will be over cobblestones, and 25 teams getting a taste of the cobblestones as they leave Compiègne now, heading out for the first 100 kilometres, Paul, in a headwind and no cobbles.
Certainly, but traditionally over the last few years there's always been an early breakaway. Riders who want to get to that first section of cobblestones with a small advantage over the rest of the main field, and that again was the case today. 21 riders went out front and built up a lead of over 2.5 minutes, but as they started to approach the Forest of Arenberg, their number was whittled down to just 9 men.
And the breakaway starting at Saint-Quentin after 57 kilometres and still looking for some 209 kilometres to go. No great names of note in the front, at least amongst the listed favourites this morning, but of course stranger things have happened when early breakaways have succeeded, even in Paris Roubaix. By the time the riders got across the first set of cobbles at Troisville, they were leading the main field by just under 2 minutes.
Certainly a great advantage to go into this part of the race with a lead over the main pack, because once you do come to the Forest of Arenberg, it certainly is chaos. That's the way it's going to be this afternoon, because the conditions through there really are atrocious.
Number 86 in the race, that is Thierry Marichal from the Lotto team. And the Cofidis rider here, Francis Moreau, former World Pursuit champion. And deciding it's time to take a drink too. And that is Thierry Gouvenou of the Big Mat Aubervilliers team. Michael Rich of the Seiko team coming through. A very workmanlike group indeed, but the time gains were not great over a peloton which is now bound for Arenberg and shrinking all the time. Already the race has crossed 8 sections of cobbles. We're now approaching Arenberg, which is zone 19, and we'll pick up the action with the lead group. Well, it's been a rough ride for them, Paul, but of those 21 riders now, we've got this group of 9 men who are going to see the Forest of Arenberg first. This is the narrow entry over the level crossing, and from then on there's a huge crowd as always here. The cobbles are bad, and the riders, I think, will prefer to ride down where the crowd are standing, and that is not going to be possible, as their Francis Moreau leads them into the forest.
It certainly won't be possible, because this year the organisation have put barriers down the side of the cobblestones for a long section of the Forest of Arenberg, but the 2 riders at the front riding for the Cofidis squad trying to steal a march over the rest of the group, but looking very comfortable in there. Tom Steels, the champion of Belgium, floating across these cobblestones at the moment because it really is slippy. You can get a chance there just to see how slow it is through the forest this afternoon.
Well, Michael Rick has made the group. The select group here, Ludo Didriksen is also a member of the group, so is Laurent Debian, who lives in Roubaix, by the way. Thierry Gouvenou, Rockier, Marichal and Max van Heeswijk. That's the front group, and just look at this. They really are having a job picking their way through because they're so greasy today.
It certainly is a very difficult Forest of Arenberg, but it's going to be absolute chaos when the main field comes in, because the main field was around about 50 riders strong just a few moments ago. So when they come in there, everybody is going to be fighting to ride near the front. And I think today the section of Arenberg is going to be a very decisive section.
Well, the last check we had on the main field, there are a few riders in between dropped from this group, but the actual main chase pack with the favourites in is 7.25 minutes back at the moment. So they're going to have to start working once they hit this stretch of road now.
Francis Moreau at the front here, riding very precariously over the cobblestone section. There you can see the barriers that the organisation have put down to try and keep the crowds from actually invading the cobblestones. But what it has done is prevented the riders from nicking behind onto that little path so that they can actually get an easier ride through the forest.
Laurent Debian, his teammate, trying to keep up with him there, inspired a little bit by the fact he certainly knows all of these roads of this part of northern France. But just look at this now. These riders are picking their own individual route through here. Most of them choosing to ride on the centre of the cobbles because I think just on the edge there, the grass is so soft, it's not a wise place to be right now.
Not the great crowds that the Forest of Arenberg has attracted over the last few years either, and I'm sure it's because it's Easter Sunday today that many of them have stayed at home and they'll be watching the event on television. Now it's Laurent Debian, the local man on the frontier, and Michael Rich, a former world champion, certainly knows how to ride in small groups like this. And Tom Steels, the champion of Belgium, in 3rd place, looking very comfortable now as he picks up a bit of speed.
I don't know if you noticed there, Paul, but the rider dived right behind the crowd there to find his own little trail. There he is. He's in a compromised position right now because I'm not so sure he can get back on the route.
Well, he can only hope that somebody doesn't take a step back, because that would be quite precarious. You can see everybody's looking at the riders on the section of cobblestones here, so he's really taken his life into his own hands going down the back there. Debian still looking very comfortable, and so does Rick. He's very supple over these cobblestones, riding with force, and this part of the Forest of Arenberg looking a little bit drier than the earlier section. And when the main field comes in there and a couple of minutes' time, it's going to be real chaos because they hit this section of cobblestones at around about 40 miles an hour.
And the riders picking their way. This is the sign that the riders are approaching the entrance to Arenberg here now, the defunct coal mines of the region. As our helicopters seeking now to pick up the chase groups here. We know that Fred Moncassin and Henk Vogels are chasing together. They're round about 5 minutes behind and a couple of minutes ahead of the field. And there's the field. It's got a little bit bigger, in fact, so there's obviously been a bit of regrouping from the back. And as far as we are aware, all of the stars are still in this front group.
There you can see Johan Museo and the leader of the World Cup, Stefano Zanini, very comfortable in the first 3 positions there. They'll be happy with that. And at the back, if you're so far back at the moment, all you can hope is to try and get through the forest without any problems at all, because certainly this is a very tricky situation to be in.
But at least this group a lot smaller now, and they've got a bit of confidence. They've made the first selection of Paris Roubaix today, and they've still got men like Museo, Ballerini, and the strong riders all around. Schmill is in here as well. And so I've also caught sight of Stuart O'Grady, and up the road just in front of this group is Moncassin and Henk Vogels.
Somebody's gone down already, Phil, and this is going to be the start of the massacre of the Arenberg forest, because there are riders all over the place there. Somebody went down. I just saw the back wheel flip over as if he went head over heels, and then all of a sudden nobody else then can actually ride their bikes, and they're going to have to try and get themselves going. But going down there, it looks like O'Grady's very comfortably away without any problems.
Well, the trouble is, once somebody touches the brakes and loses a wheel, then of course there's a ricochet effect, and that bunch now has been totally disjointed there as the riders at the front are trying to break this field up here. They're starting to push on the advantage. The Gamboys are going well, but look further down there because riders are zooming off into the crowd. And this is the problem. The riders wanted these security fences put up here because of the way the crowd flocked to reach to see them in the forest. And now it's rather working against them, I feel, because they can't get onto stretches of the road which they might have chosen otherwise. Look at this, Paul. Look, they're actually going to the crowd here now round the back. They're not going to know which way to look here. There's Stefan Barth also in trouble.
Certainly has been chaotic. There's Wilfred Peters in the white jersey for riding for Mapei there, but it looks as if Johan Museo and Stefano Zanini have disappeared. I think they too have gone down in the crashes.
So it looks like the World Cup leader and the former World Cup holder, Museo, both in trouble here in the forest and losing their front positions.
There's Zanini on the right-hand side. They're trying to get going, so he went down, but he's okay and up and riding again. A lot of pressure on the front coming from Fred Moncassin and Henk Vogels. If you get a chance, Henk Vogels is wearing a very bright orange jersey, so a bright orange helmet, I should say, and you get a chance to see him there riding very well.
Well, those two are clear of this field now, as they've so far avoided the trouble. But if you just look at the face of these riders, it's a massive concentration. And it's literally every man for himself. There's Stuart O'Grady in the bottom of our picture as he passes through.
Eddie Seigneur going through there, the champion of France, riding for Gann now, and you can see O'Grady coming through too. Once you get to the latter part of this forest of Arenberg, 2.4 kilometres long, certainly you are able to pick up a little bit of speed. The 4th place rider there in the blue jersey is George Hincapie, so he's got through the forest riding very well. Just behind him, Andrea Taffy, who finished 3rd in this race just a few years ago.
And Taffy's got himself a little bit of form, an early leader of the Tour of Langkawi. Now coming and tasting hell at first sight here as we're now deep into the forest. The field completely split up. That rider who's gone onto the grass there is going to find going a little bit tough now. One or two have seen this gap in the crowd here and have been shooting off behind the crowd. And frankly, I don't know where they're going because the crowd is very, very dense further up. I'm not sure they can rejoin.
In fact, there's a whole bunch of riders there behind the people, Phil. In fact, the race is split into two. It's one section racing on the cobblestones and the other half riding down behind the crowds.
Well, there's Stefan Barth, easily to pick out, the blue top to his French national jersey. He's picked himself back up by one or two riders. I can see a few Dutch riders have made the move. They've gone round the back door. And just watch the amazement of the crowd here now. They're not sure which way to look here, behind them or across at the main road, because the riders are on both sides. We'll get some idea what will happen to these riders as we move towards the exit to the forest. But I just hope they've got a way back onto the course.
Certainly could be a little bit complicated when they get to the end there. It's Gianluca Bortolami riding for Festina coming through. And you can see that the forest of Arenberg today certainly has been a deciding section of cobblestones. Just on the back of that group there as well, Franco Ballerini.
Well, it does look, in fact, Mario Ertz has just gone through our picture for Lotto. It looks as though we've got this race completely split up now. Remember that the leaders are through and we're waiting to catch up with those, and Laurent Debian is the man on the attack there from that front group. We're watching here a group that's coming through in the region of 6 minutes behind now. Looks like Moncassin and Vogel's exiting, so they've made a very good move now. They're quite a long way clear of the field, which has been torn apart by a number of crashes. Now let's get back up to the front, because this is Laurent Debian.
Debian's on the next section of cobblestones already, this section known as the section of Denain. A very long section too, around about 2 kilometres long. And I'm surprised to see this rider from Cofidis riding out alone, because behind him he has a group of 3 or 4 riders. And behind, still chaos in Arenberg, because Andrea Taffy coming out of it with his very own teammate Wilfred Peters. And I think that accident there was caused by the photographers getting just a little bit too close.
They certainly left them no room to exit with the crowd as well, and Taffy's hit the deck. Peters looked a little bit concerned about him, but I suspect he'll be on his bike pretty quickly. Now, sorry about the rain on the lanes. It is actually starting to rain as well right now, as apart from the water being splashed up by the back wheel here of Laurent Debian, a man who lives in this region of France, so he can't complain about the roads.
He certainly can't. He knows this section of cobblestones very well. He will just go through a small bridge in a couple of moments, which is known as the Bridge Gibus, which is a nickname for Gilbert Duclos-Lassalle, and there'll be a sign across there saluting the former 2-time winner of Paris Roubaix.
And there it is, the Pont Gibus. I even remember that when it was actually a railway line. That's how many times I've seen Paris-Roubaix. That line is now long since defunct. And Debian picking his way down the corridor here. Now he would like a little bit of help from behind, but let's go back and just have another look, replay here of the problems in the forest. You can see the 2 riders coming up. You can see how the photographers are trying to snatch a shot and then jump out of the way. And right in the distance there, one rider had a terrific fall. His bike was high in the sky. And then that started the ricochet effect in the centre of the peloton as riders came to a halt. And if they didn't fall, well, they certainly were stopped.
They certainly were, and this shows you why it's so important to come into the forest of Arenberg near the front of the peloton. The 2 riders in first and second place there, both GAN riders. The one with the orange helmet is Henk Vogels, and a little bit further back, that's Fred Moncassin. So today, he's picked his way through the forest of Arenberg in a very good situation. Stefano Zanini is still there on the right-hand side before his incident, which put him on the ground, but you can see that's the incident that took out the leader of the World Cup.
And now, as from what we can understand from the team car, in fact, Zanini fell on his face here. And indeed, Museo has fallen and apparently has stopped on the roadside. He has a knee injury. That's all we know at the moment. But it looks as though Museo is in big trouble. And this Rabobank rider here, oh, and down he goes. He corrected the first time and overdid it, and down he went again. That chaos is in the forest of Arenberg as we now go back up to the leader here. I think he's still on zone 18, Laurent Debian.
Well, he only has a small lead, 6 seconds, Phil, over 3 chasing riders who survived the forest of Arenberg: Michael Rich, Tom Steels and Thierry Gouvenou. Now, I would have thought with over 100 kilometres to go to the finish that this young man would just sit up a little bit and wait for the group to join him, because the biggest chance of survival is keeping a group of riders who can work together.
Well, he's a survivor, don't forget, of the original 21 riders, and he may not yet know exactly who is chasing him, but if it does work out, he's got some strong riders there who might give him a hand.
In fact, those 3 riders who were chasing have joined the leader, Laurent Debian, so 4 men at the head of the race and a long way behind, around about 5 minutes, the rest of the main field. And I would think at the front of that group, after the Forest of Arenberg, there will be a lot of GAN riders to the front of a big split in the main field.
So the order now is Tom Steels, if we look down from the helicopter, Michael Rick, with Debian looking over his shoulder, and the other man is Thierry Gouvenou, who's now slipped into 3rd place. He's that instant again, which took out Taffy. Peters almost apologising to his teammate there, but it wasn't his fault. And this is the Rabobank rider. I haven't really got an ID on this man, but he's down, and I hope he's not out.
Certainly Paris-Roubaix today, many of the riders who get to the finish will have a lot of stories to entertain their friends with for the next week, because it really was almost impossible to ride a bike through there. You could just see how difficult it was to control with that Rabobank rider here. But the race has certainly smiled on these 4 leaders at the moment, because they still have an advantage of 5 minutes and 20 seconds over the rest of the field.
And ironically, despite all the slipping and sliding, the sun is trying to break through again now. as we've had about 10 days of pretty consistent rain in this part of France, which has made all of the cobblestones wet. The roads themselves dry out almost immediately, but of course the water stays on the cobbles.
It certainly does, and the fact is that at the moment we also have over this weekend Paris Roubaix mountain bike event, and the amount of traffic that goes over these roads over these 2 days I think does add to the confusion and the chaos and the amount of mud that gets splattered onto the route. Debian here wearing number 123, moved across to the Cofidis team last year after the Castorama team fell apart. He then also rode for Gann, and he got 2 victories last year in the Midi Libre and a stay to the Tour de France in a somewhat controversial finish with Sergei Uchakov.
And Michael Rick here for the Seiko Cannondale team. I was with Michael in South Africa earlier this year, where he helped his team take out the Tour of the Cape, and they got some valuable miles in some glorious weather in there as well. He's a very popular man in South Africa, Michael Rick. He's won the Tour of South Africa as well in the past, the Rapport Tour, and it's a pretty well-known boy throughout South Africa.
Well, there are the 4 leaders now, about to be joined by 4 chasers, and Laurent Debian will see the shape of his teammate Francis Moreau coming up there as well. And in the orange jersey of Rabobank, Max van Heeswijk, a man who's got an excellent sprint, and he too will be looking to make sure he can keep to the front over the cobblestones. Van Heeswijk is a very good bike handler because he actually came into the sport of road racing from being a former BMX rider, as well as holding a black belt in karate, so you could say this man from Holland is a very versatile performer.
We might need the black belt in karate on these cobbles later today. Could do with breaking a few of those stones.
Ludo Dieriksen, the Lotto rider there, just putting the pressure on to try and bring this group all back together. So now that they have an 8-man group, they can start to work very well together. They escaped, as you said earlier, after 57 kilometers of racing, leaving them over 200 kilometers left to race to the finish. Now we're coming into the much more crucial part of the course, and they still have about 60 miles to go before they reach the finish.
Absolutely. I've got it pegged at exactly 60 miles, Paul, 98 kilometers. We're heading up towards zone 17. And these 8 leaders have a lead of 5 minutes 25 seconds now on the Sorensen, Vogels, Taffy, Moncassin, Hincapie group.
A very good group that is indeed, but they'll have an awful lot of work to try and pull back these 8 men. It's good to see Tom Steels at the front, a good card for the Mapei squad to play, because they were expecting him to ride well last week in Wevelgem, and he disappeared once the race went over the big cobble climbs of the Kemmelberg, but now bouncing back, and he's the joker in the pack because it really takes a lot of pressure off Mapei to have a man like him in the lead group.
It wouldn't surprise me, in fact, if this wasn't a particular plan of Patrick Lefevre, the manager of Mapei, to have put Steels in a move like this, because should this breakaway actually succeed, well, Steels is very much a man who could take this race out, and Mapei are covered at the moment. But the news is not good, because coming out of Arenberg, Lefevre has said on race radio that the Arenberg Forest has taken away his 2 top men. Museo is on his way to hospital with an injured knee, and in fact retired to now is the World Cup leader Zanini, who fell on his face, so it's confirmed.
It certainly is. It was one of the most dramatic crossings of the Forest of Arenberg I've seen over recent years, but it is very strange because certain sections of these cobblestones are quite dry and quite raceable, but there in the forest you do have to remember that that section of road is only open for 2 days of the year. That's for the forest, the mountain bike race that goes through there, Paris Roubaix, and the amateur event, which happens a little later in the year. So a lot of mud and a lot of grass starts to grow up through those cobblestones, and with a little bit of rain thrown in as well, it does make it quite treacherous.
Over the railroad crossing there, these 8 leaders are still clear. Roquier, Moreau, Dieriksen, Van Heeswijk, Gouvenou, Riesch, Steels and Debian.
Always amazes me when you watch Paris Roubaix. Riding it is not quite the same sensation because you're just concentrated on the wheels in front. But when you see the speed that some of these riders actually go around the corners, you have to bear in mind these are cobblestones. They're slightly slippy because of the little bit of rain that's starting to fall down, and these men are riding as if the roads are dry.
And putting their faith in the man in front because they can't possibly see the holes coming straight at them when they're in a line like this.
Second from the back there was Laurent Debian. He'd be happy to see that his teammate Francis Moreau has come up there, because certainly 2 riders from Cofidis are very strong riders when it comes to these small breakaway groups, and a man who is really impressing me this afternoon is Michael Rich. He certainly has come along to to great professional career with Seiko Cannondale in that early season, sorted down to South Africa, I think put a lot of riders in good stead. And in the future, I think we'll see many professional teams heading down there to prepare the early continental season.
Well, I was speaking to Michael yesterday, in fact, before the race, and he said that last year he didn't even get to taste the cobblestones. He was already eliminated because he had a series of punctures on the good roads, and he didn't actually get to race with the leaders through the cobbles. Well, he's made up for that today because he's been out in front since Saint-Quentin. He's seen the group around him and go smaller and smaller and gradually get bigger and bigger again now because they're up to 8 in front. The time gaps are still confirmed at around 5.5 minutes to the next group on the road. And it looks as though Debian is in a bit of trouble here, and Rocky, Paul.
Certainly is. What you have to try and do when you ride over these cobblestones is stay right on the wheel in front, because although it's a question of having a lot of faith in the man in front, because there's so much wind in this region of France, you do have to bear in mind that you have to slipstream and take a few risks. But you can see Rocky slipping off the back of the wheel in front, and Debian too, not really having the confidence or the guts to stay right on the wheel of the man in front of him.
And so somebody, I think it's Michael Rick, is driving this group along. And now Laurent Debian has been in the thick of the action all day, and a lot of it he's been doing by himself. I think he's paying for the price here. 94 kilometres still to ride, and Debian might well be saying farewell at this point.
He may well be, and I think he's now going to question the sense of his attack just a little earlier when he went through the section of cobblestones just after Arenberg at Denain, when he threw himself to the front of the race all on his own instead of slowing down, saving a little bit of his effort and energy, because he realizes there's 65 miles to go to the finish, so why go out alone? Why not keep the group together? And I think now what's happened is he's actually paid for that effort.
It looks as though Max van Heeswijk has got the devil's seat now, sitting at the back of the line. It is Rick who's driving the pace over the road here. Big, strong boy, enjoying his contract with Cannondale because they've appreciated the strength here of a man who was a team time trial rider, for which he got himself, and I think it was an Olympic gold medal. And now Michael Rick enjoying the life in the hot seat at the front of Paris Roubaix. But another attack has gone flying off the front. Here's Ludo Dirksen, who's tried to go alone. A bit early, I thought.
Certainly is a little bit early. The interesting thing about the Seiko Cannondale team is they're one of the teams that have come together and used a suspension system, but not a suspension fork system, in fact a suspension headset system, and they are hoping that that will give them the edge. But interesting to note, Phil, over the last couple of years, that the percentage of riders using the RockShox or suspension fork has really decreased dramatically, and in fact in most recent years most of the winners haven't had any suspension at all.
And Dirksen is proving quite a capture, I think, by Jean-Luc Van der Broek this year. Second in the Belgian Championships last year, and now he's throwing down the gauntlet to make them hopefully regroup. He may just want to get rid of the weaker riders in this escape and try and get the front group a little bit more workmanlike. That may be his plan.
Well, B, you can see Tom Steels knows the plan though, because he's right up there in the action, sitting on the wheels of the riders in front, and suffering just a little bit at the back, the Frenchman who rides for Big Matt, Thierry Gouvenou, who's there currently in 6th position on the road. But you can just get a chance to see how fast these riders do go over the cobblestones.
Max van Heeswijk, and there's Francis Moreau. Tom Steels, champion of Belgium, and number 83, Ludo Dirksen, back in the group now. And they're getting themselves more workmanlike. Michael Rick is certainly giving it just about everything here. He hasn't shirked his lead at all today. And Steels thinks that's a short term, but it's enough for me, because they know there's still a long way to go. The best part of 90 kilometres still left, and of course we're only on approaching zone 16 of the cobbles here.
Certainly, some of the toughest cobblestones lay a long way up the road. In fact, the effort there put in by Michael Rick over that last section of cobblestones has shed off 2 riders, and the leading group now just down to 6 men. It's good, I think, the Seiko Cannondale team managed to get a man into the breakaway here, because in fact they started with a slightly weakened team with only 6 men coming to the start. And as you mentioned earlier, Salvatore Commesso, the winner of the Giro del Capo, in fact wearing the top number for that squad, wearing 112. He's the team leader today in the absence of men like Mario Cipollini.
And a tough call too, because he's really only enjoying his first full season as a pro. Commesso got his first pro wins in South Africa, and now he's finding himself the team leader in Paris-Roubaix. But he's not up in this group. In fact, we haven't seen him all day. We might see him a little later on if anybody gets up here. But there's a general regrouping down there, and it looks as though as we go on to zone 16, that Roquier and Debian have rejoined the leaders.
Well, that can happen, but you don't want to put that to the chance too many times, because once you get dropped on a section of cobblestones, normally the group will ride very well once they get back onto the tarmac roads. But for them, I think in this instance, the fact is that there was only about 6 kilometres distance between the two sections of cobblestones, and they didn't want to keep the pressure on too much, which is why those two riders managed to get onto the back. But once you go out of some of the later sections, there are very long straight roads, and a working group, then you've got absolutely no chance of coming back into the lead.
Well, the lead now is coming down all the time. Frédéric Moncassin's group, which we haven't had a camera on for a while, but I think we also lost a camera in the forest. One of the motorbikes also took a dive, and the sooner he gets back up, we'll show you some chase groups. But the time we have is at 4 minutes 40 seconds at the moment to the Fred Moncassin group, and there's still a lot of time to bridge that, because that's not a big time gap in Paris Roubaix.
It certainly isn't, and an interesting point is that group is now 13 riders strong, and 4 of that group are made up of GAN riders, because not only was Henk Vogels and Frédéric Moncassin in that group, but also Eros Poli, and getting onto the back of the group as well, Stuart O'Grady. So GAN certainly have played the mastercard this afternoon, and the big Mappé squad, who looked like the unbeatable favourites this morning, haven't got anybody in that group at all at the moment.
A glimpse there of the rear end of Anthony Roquier from the Polti team. A new name in my book. He's actually the only Frenchman on the Italian squad in the race today, so he's showing his colours well.
Certainly, as he was brought onto the Polti squad by Luc Leblanc, who is looking to ride well in races like the Giro d'Italia and the Tour de France in what might be his last season. And he always has encouraged Polti to take 1 or 2 riders from his own country on board. It helps, I think, when you're travelling aboard, racing so many times, to have somebody at least who you can talk to in the evenings.
Often the case, and you can't blame the riders wanting a little bit of company in what is a lonely existence in between the bike races for much of the time. Now our cameraman, a little bit of stunt riding here, has got his camera just above the cobbles and zoom right in on the legs of Roquier. But you get some idea of how fast they are going over these cobbles. At this sort of speed, they look rather smooth, don't they? But in fact, there's huge holes appear every now and again, and it really does give the body a jarring.
Certainly does. Confirmation that 4 riders have come into that chasing group behind, which is it was 13 riders, so now it's 17. And in fact, there are 3 Mappé riders in there, not riders I think they would have wanted at the start of the race this morning. Andrea Taffi is there with Bart Lezen and Wilfred Peters, so not the big names like Franco Ballerini we were talking about this morning, Johan Museo, who's disappeared from the event. Ballerini, in fact, also suffered a puncture going through the Arenberg forest, and he's a little way behind the race at the moment.
Well, the Mappé are certainly having their share of bad luck in this race today. The 2 top boys are down, but Ballerini was very scathing in the papers yesterday about his team. He says his form is great, and he just hopes that somebody like Johan Museo will remember the work he did for him in the Tour de Flanders, which Museo won, and he hopes that today Museo will help him win his 2nd Paris-Roubaix because he feels so good. Well, we haven't got to decide who the leader is now, because both Zanini and Museo are out of this race, and Ballerini will be the undisputed leader, but at the moment, Paul, he's not in a position to do anything about it.
All he can hope for the moment is that he can play catch-up and get into one of those groups and try and pull himself back into the race. Another man who had difficulties going through the forest of Arenberg is André Schmiel, the winner of the event in 1994. He too came down in a crash there, and he's in a group somewhere behind. There's absolute chaos on the roads at the moment. We do know that we have a leading group of 8 riders. Chasing this group at just around about 4.5 minutes are 17 riders, and then lots of small little groups behind there with some of the great names dotted in amongst them. And hopefully once we get a little bit further down the road and we start to get the communications back again, we'll have an idea and a clearer picture of what is going on. But today Paris-Roubaix is certainly chaos, and we've lost 2 camera bikes at the moment, so we're surviving with 1 motorbike camera bike at the front, 1 helicopter, and just hoping that the whole race and the organisation can pull this thing off.
Well, it's the nature of the course, and that's why it's such a wonderful race. Whatever you might think about it, it is the ultimate challenge to the single-day cyclist. And at the moment, these guys have done the right thing. Francis Moreau riding well at the front for Cofidis here. Laurent Debian, his teammate, is here, but yo-yoing a little bit now at the back of the race. And again, this race is splitting up. And the rider in trouble here now. We've gone to the chase group at last, so we've got a camera down the road now, because this is Bert Heemstra. And Heemstra is in a small group of riders here. and they're stuck in no man's land really, because Laurie Ose is here, Marichal, who is in the original breakaway, is here, and so too is Kersipou, who's having a pretty good season, I must say. And look at that, I think Riek has gone with a puncture from the leaders.
That was Michael Riek, definitely. That was the Seiko team car pulling across there to try and give him a spare wheel, but he's very fortunate because at the moment it doesn't look as if the hammer is down in this leading group of riders here, so he may well have a chance to come back.
Well, I'll tell you what, they need him. I hope he wasn't listening to my little tale about the punctures story he was telling me yesterday, because now he's had another one at the most crucial stage of the race here. About 86 kilometres from the finish, and Michael Riek, a strong man in that breakaway, has gone from the group, and that's a real shame right now.
It certainly is. This is a cobbles at Marchienne, a very long section of cobbles, very hard indeed, and once you come out of this section you have a long straight road which takes you all the way up to Orchy, and if Michael Riek can't catch him by the end of this, he's going to have a serious amount of difficulty to get himself back into the race. Now it looked there as if that was Henk Vogel, so he's starting to pick up one or two of the riders who were caught in between.
Yeah, because there's Jan Kersipou, number 65. Vogel has got across here. Number 51 is Rolf Sorensen, I think it was 51. And so that is now, this is the chase group, Paul, of 17 men have got themselves together. So we're now looking at the second major group on the road, and the time gap at the moment is around about 4 minutes. That's what they are behind the leaders, which means that Michael Riek is somewhere in between.
Michael Riek must have to do something very special to try and get himself back to the front of this race, but he was riding very strongly before, and if he can do something over that section of cobblestones at Marchienne and integrate the leading group again before he comes out of the cobblestones, then he should be okay. But you know, at the moment the rider's starting to pick up an awful lot of pace, and it's amazing to see that there are 4 riders from GAN in this group, 3 riders from Mapei, and Rolf Sorensen for the moment only seems to have 1 teammate.
Sorensen, an opportunist, and will always take a classic whenever he gets half a chance, is now in a group which is looking very strong here. And again, Vogels has got to grips with the cobblestones of Roubaix and seems to be enjoying the experience once again.
Certainly have a lot of confidence when it comes to riding these cobblestone classics, those 2 riders from Australia, Stuart Grady and Henk Vogels, as we now come out of section number 16 and onto the road which will take them up to Orchy. Now this is a very long section of main road, about 5 miles before they get to the next section, which is a very difficult section.
Well, we're looking here at the rear of the group here. This is the chase group, and the rider in trouble is it's Jan Kersipou, so he's been distanced by the 17 riders. Now this is the situation as we understand at the moment, 8 riders, and then this group is now down to about 3 1/4 minutes behind, and then André Schmill's group is going back to almost 6 minutes. This is Thierry Marichal. He was in the original breakaway, so he's steadily going backwards as the riders come up to him, but Schmill, Paul, 5 minutes 45 down in his bunch.
And that's the big problem that André Schmill has with the Lotto squad. He really is isolated when it comes to the big events like this, because the team, although they did have 2 men in that early breakaway, are never around when he needs help in case something goes wrong, and he has to ride the race as if he's riding completely on his own. Starting to wheel his way back into the lead now as well. Gianluca Bortolami in this group of riders trying to integrate that group of 17. So it seems now as if there's being a general regrouping at the back of that group, and so the whole field clawing their way back up to the chase group. Yaroslav Ekimov was in there riding for the US Postal Service.
Well, they're bouncing over the cobbles of zone 15 now, and we're still waiting to see if Riek can get his way back up to the leaders. Here's Eki.
Strange jersey to see him. It always foxes me a little bit because he's wearing the jersey of the national champion of Russia, a title which he garnered last year, and it's almost the same as the US Postal Service, but you wonder what's the difference with it, and that's why it looks just a little bit different to the US Postal Service jersey that the rest of the team are wearing, because it is in fact the national jersey of Russia.
And the chase group now off the cobbles of zone 16. The leaders are heading up towards zone 15. So the gap is still there, round about 3 1/2 minutes to the chase group. We've no further news on Michael Riek at the moment. I see they've called in one of the neutral service cars back to this group now, as we watch Thierry Marichal trying to find his second wind and latch back on now the cobbles are over.
Certainly a very difficult thing to do, especially when you've been in a breakaway for such a long period of time. but he's done his job for the day. He got in that early break and got some publicity for his team, but you can see just how hard this section of main road is. The wind coming from the right-hand side, pushing all these riders down the left-hand gutter, and that has caused a little split in the front, and it looked as if that was Fabrizio Guidi there trying to get himself into the race.
Verhoeven was the rider from Rabobank, but the wind is pushing them right over to the left of the road. But you see, they're not interested in putting home an advantage on a few riders struggling at the back, because they know the next stretch of cobblestones will probably take care of that for them. They're more interested in trying to stay organised and focused here, especially the GAN riders now, as they try to close down on this lead group.
In fact, Phil, I think I just saw Franco Ballerini there, so he's managed to bring himself back into the race here. There's Eros Poli riding for GAN there, and I'm pretty sure I just caught the shadow of Franco Ballerini, so he too now has managed to recover from that puncture a little earlier in the Forest of Arenberg and get himself into a good group.
Well, he's put himself in a very strong position. Looking down at the leaders again, Ricky's back in that group, so our cameras didn't show him coming back, but he is back. As we now go back to the group, which is the second group on the road, and we're going to look for Ballerini in here now. This is Eros Poli, who's pulling through for GAN.
Bart Lazen on the left-hand side of the road, being told by one of his teammates just to knock it off a little bit. There's a long way still to go to the finish, and right behind Eros Poli there, I'm pretty certain, is the shape of Franco Ballerini.
Well, I'll tell you what, he's done a great ride to cross this gap, because at one stage he must have been with the Andre Schmil group, and Andre Schmil and his bunch are still about a minute and a half behind that group.
This is the lead group now, 8 riders. Michael Rick has got back up there, and they're going to turn into this very difficult section of Orchy. On the far side of the road there's a very wonderful hotel where you can stop and have a cup of coffee, walk across the pedestrian bridge and see this section of cobblestones, and leading them in there, Michael Rick. So that's a great recovery by him.
So Michael Rick has done well to get back, and seems as though he's got plenty of firepower. Now these cobbles, it's a narrow road this. The cobbles themselves, well, we had a look at them yesterday, they're not too bad.
They're not too bad, but there's a couple of little corners on this section of cobblestones, and you can see, in fact, the pressure that Michael Rick is putting on at the front there has caused this group to split. But somebody's taking over the pressure at the front there, and I would think that is Francis Moreau, judging by the star from the helicopter.
And in fact, this group now containing Moncassin has swelled to 20, which means that 3 riders have come up from somewhere, and one of them must be Franco Ballerini. So that's the answer to that. Ballerini is now definitely in this group as they start to feel their way through zone 15 here. The pressure is staying on, and the gap is coming down, Paul. It's now 2:45.
Well, it's looking a little bit precarious for those 8 leaders, because now the pressure is on in the main field, and certainly with 4 riders from GAN and now 4 riders from Mapei, they're all going to work well together. But you can see these cobblestones are still very slippy. One of the riders from TVM going down there looks a little bit like Hendrik van Dijk. He's up and running again, but you can see, oh, and that was Ekimov has gone down as well.
Ekimov's crashed, and he's picking himself up, I hope, rather quickly, but it's as greasy as you can imagine down there. And this is the problem now, the riders coming from behind, having to stop and wait while riders put themselves back in the saddle.
And the worst thing you can do is touch the brakes, because once you touch the brakes, the bike just goes from underneath you. Well, the section of cobblestones at Orchy has caused a bit of chaos there, and you can see riders picking their way off the front. So that will be an advantage for the leading group of 8 riders, because they managed to get through there safely and soundly, and they'll be organising themselves once again when they get onto the well-tarmacked roads.
Well, Ekimov's had a good Paris Roubaix in the past, and I think he might try to get himself back into the action here. But there's also the problem, you see, when the cars have to stop, because the one car stops to service a rider, and then the riders behind are obviously interfered with. They do their best to stay out of the way of the riders, but it's not always possible on these roads. And here comes the group, which I think might contain Schmil.
It could well contain Andre Schmil, who's been in a group a long way behind, but you can see just how difficult it is once you get onto the cobblestone sections. And this now is the leading group, and it looks as if one rider is missing from the group. This is Francis Moreau on the back, right in front of him Michael Rick, Thierry Gouvenou from Big Matt, who is doing the ride of his life this afternoon, and just in front of him Tom Steels, but I can't see Laurent Debian anywhere in this group.
I think Debian has gone backwards at the moment. These riders are now clear of zone 15 and heading towards Orchy, which will put them at around about 72 kilometres to go, which unfortunately in Paris-Roubaix is an awful long way to go, as Ludo Dieriksen sits here nearest the camera. Still looking pretty cool. Tom Steels. Steels will fancy his chances in the sprint if he ever got to the line. But I think, you know, Tom isn't overworking in this break. Whether he's got orders that he knows he's being chased down by a lot of his teammates. I wonder indeed, does he know that the top 2 riders are out of Paris Roubaix today, Museu and Zanini?
He certainly will know that, because Mappé is one of the squads that use a two-way communication system between the team manager and the team car. But I also wonder if Tom Steels is in a great day this afternoon, because he was supposed to be the protected man when they went into Ghent-Wevelgem last Wednesday. And the problem is, a lot of the Belgian press was saying that Steels was not in good shape. He wasn't riding as well as he should do. He has had 7 victories so far this season, but you know, after a very good early start, it may well be that he's just reaching a point in the season where he needs a break. And in fact, you can see he's bearing the sequels there on his right shin of an accident that he had a little earlier in the week.
Well, very often when you have poor form, the irony is the manager tells you to attack early because he doesn't intend you to reach the finish line. He just intends you to draw the sting of other riders in the bike race. And so that may be a reason why Steels is in the move today. But the thing is, right now, this is still the leading group in Paris-Roubaix as we move into our last 70 kilometres of the race. And the rain again is beginning to fall. And although the temperatures are reasonably pleasant, the conditions now are not.
Francis Moreau seems pretty happy with them. In fact, another man who's disappeared from this group over those cobblestones in Orchy was Max van Heeswijk, who was starting to look a little bit precarious, taking up the back spot of the group very often when we came to the section of cobblestones, and I think the fire went out of his heart once we started to get just a little bit closer to the finish. These riders have been at the head of the race now for almost 150 kilometres, so obviously 1 or 2 pairs of legs starting to get weak. But Ludo Dieriksen, as you said, certainly is quite a revelation this afternoon, riding very strongly for the Lotto squad, and I don't think Andre Schmiel will be too happy with the fact that he hasn't got anybody with him when some of the strong riders in the group are right up in front.
Yes, I think they're probably wise. I think they must have waited somewhat for Rick to come back as well, because he's putting an awful lot of weight into this breakaway group here and doing his best to keep it going. Now this is the group of, well, it was 20. You have to count them for yourself right now as the helicopter tightens in on them, but the GAN boys are feeling very confident here. There's an assistance from the Mappé team, 3 Mappé and 1 GAN, trying to keep the pace high. Rolf Sorensen is in this group as well, and he is a crafty old fox, Sorensen. He'll make sure that he doesn't do too much work when he's got strong men around him and the numerous teammates of those teams as well, and then he'll look for a move when he might be able to slip away.
Certainly that's what you have to do in a race like Paris-Roubaix, especially when you have strong teams like Mappé and GAN who are present in big numbers. You have to ride a sensible race, a tactical race, leaving all of the work up to other teams. That's exactly what Sorensen's going to have to do for the rest of this afternoon. But you can see, I think now, a bit of organisation coming into the front of this group, because not only GAN putting the hammer down, but also Mappé starting to feel a little bit more confident, I would think, because Franco Ballerini has recovered and come back into the race, and he certainly will have given them the nod. And he was a very strong man last week when we rode the Tour of Flanders. In fact, he was quite responsible, I feel, for closing down the chase behind Johan Museu there. And this afternoon, now that Museu is out of the race and Zanini a long way further back and thinking about abandoning this afternoon, then the responsibility for the win in Mappé must certainly fall on the shoulders of Franco Ballerini.
And the rain almost sleet here now as the weather turns a little bit nasty as we get onto the wide open exposed parts of this course. Compiègne must now seem an awful long way away to these riders, and because of the nature of the route, it twists and turns a little bit before it swings in towards Roubaix itself.
Well, in fact, there's been a recovery at the front again, because Max van Heeswijk, who I condemned for sitting on the back, is on the back again there, making it 8 leaders once again in the front of this race, and a recovery by Laurent Debian. So 8 men at the head of affairs, and it really is quite a strange Paris-Roubaix for the moment, but I do feel certain that this leading group of 8 riders certainly must get caught before the finish, because there's 2 very big teams chasing them.
And there's a lot of passengers now. As you can see here, nobody really wants to rush through. Dieriksen is having to go through and continue with the pressure himself once more, because there's 1 or 2 passengers here now who don't really want to get stuck in. There's Laurent Debian, dropped back and had a word with his teammate. He's been on and off like a piece of elastic today, but he's doing very well to stay up with this lead group. He seems to lose ground on the cobbles, and that's probably why he's rushed to the fore here for the next section. And I can't blame him for that. We move on to zone 14 now, which puts us at 69 kilometres to go at Orchy. nasty stretch of cobbles, this one, Paul.
It certainly is. You can see once again the rain starting to come down, and the difficult thing about the cobblestones today is, although we've had an awful lot of heavy rain in the north of France over the last 10 days, putting a lot of mud onto the course, it started to dry out a little bit in places, and then once this small thin film of rain has got onto them, it makes it even worse, I think, than if it was raining consistently.
Yes, because they're drying and then they're getting wet, and the riders don't know whether they're coming or going right now. And with this little break of 8, the sole survivors of the 21 that took off a long time ago, and the group of 20 strong, it's still all together, is slowly but surely hauling them in.
The difficult part about this section in Paris Roubaix as well is once you actually race from Compiègne up to the north, you're zigzagging all over the countryside looking for these sections of cobblestone. So sometimes the wind is coming from the left, sometimes it's coming from the right, and at the moment, looking at the speed of the riders here, I would say they're riding into a block headwind.
Yeah, absolutely right, and that's been the direction of the wind all day today, which is a shame in some ways, because had they picked up a cross or tailwind, then I think we might have seen a very different race.
Again, Debian riding for Cofidis in a white jersey and the blue shorts there, suffering over these cobblestones, not able to match the pace set at the front by the other riders in this group. And again, probably the same 3 riders dropping off the back there. Rockier trying to recover and pulling himself up to the leading group. But every time we come to the cobblestones, Phil, it's always Michael Rich on the front setting the tempo, and it's blowing the group apart.
Well, one's got back, and I think it is Rocket who's just hooked up to the back again, leaving 2 riders off the back. As they go through, this is now, as I say, zone 14. The latest time gap is 2 minutes and 25 seconds to Moncassin's group, and we seem to have lost shots of them for the moment again as we get back onto the cobbles behind the camera bike. These are the riders in trouble at the back. Poor old Max van Heeswijk is the rider now, beginning to find this stretch of cobblestones a little bit not to his liking. There's Laurent Debian. We've managed to get round him. You can get a close glimpse of the mud there as the motorbikes accelerate and try and service the breakaway, which is now down once more to 6 riders, because Rockier, I was about to say Rockier's got on, but I think he might be punctured now. Well, that is the law of the jungle, Paul. When you're down, you really don't want to be knocked like this, do you?
Certainly very bad timing there, having a puncture on that section of cobblestones, because this is a tough section of cobblestones. As you can see, it climbs up a little bit, making it just a little bit harder than the rest of the cobblestones that we've come over so far. Now, the leading group just down to 5 riders. Ludo Dirksen's decided he's the man who's going to put the pressure on. And Tom Steele's becoming a little bit more attentive when we come to these cobble sections, moving himself up into 2nd and 3rd position, riding cleverly, but never actually hitting the front.
Well, I think that this time those 3 riders are not going to rejoin these boys, because the pressure is again on as they continue now to pull clear. Michael Rich has let a gap go here. He's let Tom Steele's and Dirksen get a little bit away. He's trying to put it to rights now as he grits his teeth and tries to race across, and the speed of Michael Rich has opened the gap up on the other 2.
Certainly is, but you can see just how close Tom Steele's is riding to the wheel of his compatriot Ludo Dirksen there. He's right in the slipstream. He's trying not to use too much energy at all, and these are the kind of roads that the riders are starting to face all the way up to the finish line now. There's little bits of cobbles, there's little bits of tarmac, and a lot of holes.
Great big holes, absolutely. Look at this now. They're having to stay right dead centre on this section of the course. But imagine if a big bunch of 20 tries to cross this, then they could find themselves going into those holes. And the thing about the holes when they're full of water is you never know how deep they are.
You never know what's at the bottom of them either.
That's right, yeah.
Well, this is Francis Moreau, a great rider. He's been a professional for many years now. He's ridden for some of the top teams, now riding for his local team, because he too is from the north of France. He's actually a Picard, which is just south of Roubaix, and he rides very comfortably over these cobblestones. A lot of the former track pursuiters seem to have the suppleness required, combined with the strength to get over the cobblestones very well indeed, because another man from the north of France, Alain Bondu, rode well over the cobbles in Paris-Roubaix and finished 3rd one year, right behind Sean Kelly.
Just watching Michael Rich come down that right-hand bend, and he almost went into the crowd. He completely lost his nerve making that corner, and he's lost a place as well, because he was making the pace to join the leaders, but one by one they've gone by him. Here he is.
Another man you see, I think, learning from experience of riding Paris-Roubaix over the last few sections. He's been at the front, he's been putting the hammer down, using an awful lot of energy. The other riders in the group have been sitting back saying, fine, Michael, if that's how strong you are, you just set the pace over these sections of cobblestones. But when you do choose to set the pace over the section of cobblestones, you can end up being on the front for 1.5 kilometres. Whereas if you're in the second or third position there, you can just sit in the slipstream and leave it up to the rider who's decided to set the pace. And at the end of the day, that's what's starting to pay for Michael Rig.
So it's Dieriksen, Steels, Thierry Gouvenou. These are the riders now who are trying to continue towards Roubaix as they come off zone number 14. And we're bound now for zone 13. And 3 riders in the lead. There are chasing riders we are hearing now, trying to get away from the Moncassin group, and we'll find out who they are as soon as we can.
Michael Rig and Francis Moreau trying to pull themselves back up to the head of the race, but behind the group that was before around about 20 men starting to split.
Now this is where it is too, and down below us we'll see if we can ID some riders for you. Fred Moncassin is there, and I think that is Ballerini who's first around the corner at the moment.
In fact, in second position there is Magnus Backstedt.
Backstedt,
the new rider riding for Gann this year, 3rd year as professional. He rode for Kolstrop, rode for Pullmans, a very good time trialist, and he's been brought this year onto the Gann squad.
Well, the Rabobank rider looks like Leon Van Bon. I'm beginning to wonder if it was Van Bon who did that spectacular fall in the Forest of Arlenberg. Either way, he's up here now. 3 strong riders. Magnus Backstedt from Sweden on the Gann team. And that looks like Fred Moncassin crossing the gap.
That is Frédéric Moncassin. You can see he's not wearing a helmet. One of the French riders who opts for the possibility of not wearing a helmet in 1 or 2 of these races. It is over the last few years a thing that has changed a lot in professional cycling. Riders opting to wear the helmet on much more numerous occasions than they used to in the past. But some riders taking the option when it comes to the big races. Men like Frédéric Moncassin just feels so much more comfortable racing without one.
He's absolutely flying across this gap, but he's obviously chasing down because he's afraid of the fact that Ballerini has gone up there. Van Bon must never be sneezed at. He's a very strong rider, World Championship medalist last year. And Fred is flying over these cobbles at the moment.
Shouting there, waving at his hand, trying to attract the attention of his teammate in the front there, saying, look, hold on, I'm coming across here. We can have 2 Gann riders in the front, and this could be the decisive move. He's almost waving in urgency to try and get across there because he thinks this is the move that's going to count.
Well, they're bridging at the moment to form a group here, and it's 2 minutes 25 is still the gap. As we see again, Fred bridging that gap over the cobbles. Just touching his brakes lightly. His back wheel slid actually around that corner.
He's a fantastic bike handler. Another man who came into the sport after a very good career in BMX. And last year, after the Tour de France, he actually took a couple of days off from road racing and took part in the Tour de France VTT, the mountain bike race across France, and won a stage.
Well, although I said it's Ballerini up there, Paul, I'm beginning to suspect it's Wilfred Peters, his teammate in that, doing a lot of work in this lead group of 3. We can't quite get close enough yet. We know that Van Bon is there, we know that Magnus Backstedt is there, we know that Moncassin is coming across rapidly, and 2 others. We're going to have a group of 6 here very shortly, and it looks as Backstedt's dropping back for him, excuse the pun.
Backstedt has definitely seen that this is Frédéric Moncassin. He saw the wave a little earlier on. He's obviously realised now that he does have a teammate coming across. A great move by the Swede there, sitting up and waiting for his teammate. This man has certainly got a great career in front of him now. 8 or 9 riders have managed to get away from that group.
Well, this is completely split up. What was 20 riders now? A little bit of panic in store here because they've chosen the approach to zone 13 to try and break up these 20 riders. There you have a perfect echelon, giving us the wind direction from the bottom of our picture. And they've got themselves all together, and that is quite a big gap actually.
It certainly is. You can see 1 or 2 riders trying to get across. They realise the urgency of letting a man like Frédéric Moncassin get away. And once again, they're starting to recover. They're closing that gap down a little bit, and you can see how strong the wind is coming across from the right-hand side of the road.
Well, this is Biagio Conte of the Scrigno team sitting at the back of this little workman-like group. And 1 or 2 riders have come up here we wouldn't have expected at this stage of the race, but good luck to him, because this race now is split up really all over northern France here. There's only little groups everywhere now.
Certainly a big Paris Roubaix this afternoon. Henk Vogel's there just going to the back of the group. He'll be happy because his man Frédéric Moncassin has nipped across there. They have a lot of respect for Moncassin, although he's been consistently a second place finisher over the last couple of years. Maybe today it's going to change around. He so really believed that he was going to win Paris Roubaix last year, and once again somebody just came by him on the line.
Well, we're now on to another little nasty stretch of cobblestones here as the riders bounce their way through. This is Ludo Dieriksen. This is the lead group of 3 riders as they go off zone 13.
This is Mont-Saint-Pével. In fact, there's a very nasty section of cobblestones coming up very soon. A section of cobblestones that they haven't used for a few years. They used to, in fact, come the opposite way round. They're going to come along here, past the church, and then take a right-hand turn into this section of cobblestones. And there, again, a lot of mud and a lot of wet roads have made this Paris Roubaix section almost a classic.
So, Gouvenou is the man doing the work here now. Now, here's Fred Moncassin in the chase group. Rolf Sorensen on the far side. Sorry about the little bit of picture break up there. Is Ballerini, so he is here. Wilfred Peters is here. So this is the group which has now got themselves together. There's Backstead, who went back and picked up for Fred Moncassin. The reason I'm hesitating, Paul, I think it was Van Bon who crashed in the forest because his jersey's filthy.
Absolutely. In fact, one man that you missed as we went through there, in fact, was Andrea Taffy. So 3 riders from Mapei in this group, 2 riders from Gan. This is certainly a big decision this afternoon. And in fact, it's good to see 2 Rabobank riders there, Van Bon, and as well to help him out, Rolf Sorensen, just sitting second from the back there. And I think the Festina rider must be Bruno Boscardin.
In fact, that break has swelled a little bit here, but the Mapei boys seem to have done it all right again, and they could be pulling a race around from what has been a total disaster for them so far. On to zone 13 now. I think there's 8 riders in this chase group now, with Peters, Moncassin, Sorensen, Ballerini, Backstead, Taffy, Van Bon. It's quite a nice little breakaway.
It certainly is. 4 riders from Mapei, 2 riders from Gan, 2 from Rabobank. So a big representation of the 3 major teams in the race this afternoon. And in fact, not a lot of other teams getting very much publicity out of this Paris-Roubaix. In fact, the gap there, Phil, looks as if it's come down quite dramatically on those 3 leaders.
Well, it certainly does from the air. They're telling us it's still over 2 minutes, but we'll find out. There's the split now, and that's the remnants of the 20-man group coming around the corner, so they're hardly out of it. Nasty little right-hand turn now as we go onto zone 12. And this is a particularly bad stretch of cobblestones here. As you can see the way we turned off the road, literally we've gone down a farm trail now to just take in some extra cobbles.
This really is a tough section of cobblestones, and if I can just raconte a little anecdote. I actually fell off in this section of cobblestones a few years ago, and I was so tired I lay on the ground, and I decided I was going to give up Paris-Roubaix there and then. I wasn't going to move. The crowd picked me up, they put me back on my bike, and I thought, well, I'd better get going again, and I did, and I ended up finishing 15th.
And the motto there, Paul, is you never give up, right?
You cannot give up in a race like Paris-Roubaix. No matter how much bad luck you have to pay attention.
That's Steels. That's Steele, so he can now claim to have fallen on the same stretch of cobblestones as Paul Sherwen, because down has gone Tom Steele. Look at the atrocious cobbles here. They're an inch thick in mud, and that is a shame because Steele was going well. Now he's got to get up and get away quickly. Here's the crash. He simply rode out his back wheel.
But what a move by Dieriksen. He was right behind him, and he managed to flick himself around. There is Tom Steele. What he was trying to do there, I think, was get back onto the top section of the cobblestone there, right along the ridge, and he just lost it completely. And in fact, a very slow change here. He's having the front wheel put in there, and it's taking an awful long time.
Well, it was his back wheel that went first, but obviously he's damaged his front wheel in the impact as the car itching to get by him there, but won't make the go of it. The Mavic team car has stopped, and they finally get him away. Now, as Paul Sherwen has said, that was a bad change. He's lost a lot of time. He may well have lost a lot of his impetus. And, you know, the group behind of the riders that they've shed can't be very far back now.
In fact, they're making the corner now into the cobbles of Mont-Saint-Pével. The man there, in fact, in the red jersey, just for directing all of the motorbikes out of the way, is Laurent Bezot, himself a former Tour de France rider, former professional. He knows exactly how to control these races, been brought into the organisation of the Tour de France. And what they're doing now is keeping all of the motorbikes out of this section of cobblestones, including the motorbike from the television, because it is such a dangerous section of cobblestones. What the press and the media have to do is they have to leapfrog forward here and rejoin the race about 3 miles up the road.
Well, I think, Paul, they're now no more than a minute behind. There's more trouble there. Oh, my goodness me. I think that was Taffy in all sorts of bother, and somebody's gonna taken the detour across the grass. This is the same stretch where Steels went down. It must be so slippery here. and I reckon they're about a minute behind Steels now.
Unbelievable. That was Rolf Sorensen there. Just watch this. In fact, the man in the front is Wilfred Peters there. That is Sorensen losing it, going off the road into the field, round the back of that crowd, recovering so unbelievably and getting himself back into the race. That was remarkable.
You see, you just never know when you're standing in the grandstand in the Paris Roubaix. Somebody got a good view of Sorensen going through the back door there, but now this group itself, this is now the group behind that Sorensen group, is also spinning up under pressure.
It certainly is. That was a bit of chaos there as we came through that section of the mud there where Tom Steels fell off, and it nearly caused a very nasty end to Paris-Roubaix this afternoon for Rolf Sorensen.
Good bike handler though, Paul, and the wily old Dane took to the grass. Look, he found grass. Right now he'd have found solid mud in the fields here.
Now that has caused an awful lot of devastation at the front of the group. Ballerini got through there with no problems at all. With him, 2 riders from Gann. In second position there is Backstead.
Yeah,
Oh.
Backstead's being something. Look at this now. I mean, you're going to be up to your axles in it on that right-hander.
Unbelievable. In there, Fred Moncassin, and just getting onto the back as well, Wilfred Peters. But this section of cobblestone has split that group completely. There were 20 riders going into it, and now there's 1s and 2s all over the place.
And Sorensen is looking a bit shaky now. He's lost his nerve a little bit when he came around that corner. 1 or 2 riders still trying to bridge from the chase group. But this is completely split up here now, and I think the man causing all of the trouble is Ballerini at the front, and he's just got Backstead and Moncassin now. That's all that's left.
Well, Moncassin's going to be pretty happy with that because he's got a great sprint. If this can be the form of the breakaway counter-attack going up to the leaders, because we still have 3 men up the road at the moment, 2 leaders being chased by Tom Steels, and in fact the pressure that Ballerini's putting on, it doesn't look as if he's going to take any prisoners.
God, he's riding with such confidence right now, Franco Ballerini. Remember, he had to fight back from what was a seemingly hopeless position today, and now he's going so quickly, he is riding Moncassin off the wheel.
Well, that's strange to see because Moncassin is such a great rider on the cobblestones, and he was right on the wheel of Backstead, but the acceleration of Franco Ballerini was a thing a bit too much for Fred Moncassin. He's pushed him off the back of the wheel, and that is going to be very difficult for him to pull himself back up there.
Well, it looks as though we might just about be reaching the end of zone 12 here, and these guys won't be too sorry about that as they slowly regroup.
Well, the unfortunate thing about zone 12, in fact, is you come off the cobblestones onto a piece of tarmac, and then there's another little section of cobblestones which Franco Ballerini has gone onto first there. Right onto the back wheel of his own teammate now. Backstead can't follow the pressure of Franco Ballerini, so the 2 Gann riders in serious difficulty, and Franco Ballerini's putting the hammer down.
Well, this is the 10th year that Franco Ballerini has taken part in Paris-Roubaix. He has an honours list which will be the envy of the world. He's won it, he's finished 3rd, twice in fact, and he's been such a consistent rider. And it's the one race he openly admitted in the papers yesterday he loves and he wants to win again, and he's firing.
He certainly is. He's decided now he's going to put a little bit of pressure on just to see who's going to come up to him. He knows that he's got 3 teammates behind, and they can do some work to make sure that they cover the counterattacks, which must surely come after Franco Ballerini, because still around about 55 kilometres to go before the finish, and the man trying to get into contention is Magnus Backstead. Now, Phil, for me, he's certainly been the revelation this afternoon because he is riding such a strong race.
He's another find in Paris-Roubaix. We found O'Grady and we found Vogels last year. Now we've found Backstead of Sweden, all on the same team. But right now, the man they can't control is Franco Ballerini. And here they've got Moncassin in a Mappe sandwich now with Peters and I think Taffy. And they're going to hold him there, although look as though they're chasing flat out. I think Ballerini is going that little bit quicker.
Certainly, maybe they're trying to pull as many riders as they can into that front group because there's still an awful long way to go. And let's cast our minds back to a couple of years ago when Mappe ended up getting 1, 2 and 3.
Well, I don't think that can happen again this year, surely, with these riders left at the front right now. They've lost their big names already today. Not that Ballerini isn't a big name, especially when it comes to Paris-Roubaix, because he most certainly is. But the leaders are still away. This is Dieriksen and Gouvenou. Remember that Steels has had that fall, and we haven't picked him up yet, but he hasn't been caught by Ballerini, so which means he must be somewhere in the middle, and Michael Rick also is somewhere in the middle. We haven't seen him either.
Well, Ludo Dieriksen is a revelation, I think, as well of this year's Paris-Roubaix. The man last year had 5 wins. Most of those were in smaller Belgian races, but the big performance that he put in was 2nd place in the Belgian Championships as they go now through the feeding station. And once they've gone through that feeding station at Mérigny, it leaves them around about 59 kilometres to go to the finish. So still over an hour and a half racing.
Now this, they tell me, Paul, is where the riders who think when they've lost their chance at Paris Roubaix, they all decide to give up at that feeding station. The rest go on to finish in Roubaix. Those days have changed now. I think everybody really does want to say at the end of the day they finished Paris Roubaix. And there's still a lot of riders on the highway today. But this is now Franco Ballerini. He has come from the back group, from the forest of Arenberg. He has steadily worked his way forward. And now, by my calculation, Paul, there's only 4 riders left in front of him.
Well, he's taking the race by the horns at the moment, because just a little bit further down the road there's a big chase group behind him. 2 of the riders in that group will be his teammates, and 2 riders from Gans. So there we are. The chasers, 4 men. That's Taffy and Wilfred Peters, Frederic Mocassin and Magnus Backstedt. So I would think Franco Ballerini will know exactly what is going on there, and he will hope that these riders come up to him, because still we have 1.5 hours racing remaining.
And Moncassin's got to be a little bit surprised that Backstedt, his teammate, is riding so well today and trying to do so much. Here they are at Marigny. The actual name of the town here is Nouveau-Jeu, and it's in Marigny. And they're 59.5 kilometres officially from the line at this point. These guys then are riding about 58 kilometres from the finish, the 2 leaders. But the gap is closing quite rapidly now. We haven't yet got a time check, but we understand that Ballerini, Paul, is now barely a minute behind them.
Can't be too far behind, because in fact that's the judge's car, the referee car, the red one from the Society Tour de France, which has just been forced past. So it could well be that very rapidly we're going to see the shape of Franco Ballerini coming forward. This is Jean-Luc Van den Broek, the uncle of Frank Van den Broek, the winner of the recent Paris-Nice race. Himself always a great performer when it came down to the one-day classics, and a very good time trialist, explaining the situation to Ludo Dieriksen on the front. And I think what he will be telling him is there's a group of 4 or 5 riders coming up, with 3 riders from the Mappé squad.
Well, win or lose for Dieriksen, he's got to be pleased with the publicity he's got Lotto today. Here is Ballerini just checking over his shoulder, pushing a huge gear now, but the gap is there. It's round about 30 seconds back to the next group, which includes 2 of his teammates. There they are. That's Michael Rick down there and Tom Steele. So Ballerini is now fighting out 3rd place in Paris-Roubaix. There's only 2 people ahead of him.
Well, that's a remarkable comeback for this man who was so far behind when we came out of the forest of Arenberg. And I think he'd be happy to see the shape of his teammate Tom Steele, because there he will have a great ally. And he'll probably let him know that just a little bit further down the road are 2 other Mappé riders trying to come forward. There's the moment, the little nod of acknowledgement. I'm here, let's get on with it now. And it may well be that now that he's found his teammate, he'll decide to try and go alone, because the thing is, those riders haven't managed to pull themselves back from Franco Ballerini. They were around about 20 seconds behind, and they haven't made any gain on him at all.
No, that's right. And Steels and Rick are obviously falling back or holding their own with the 2 leaders, but aren't going forward. Now you can see the gaps as the riders still come at the helicopter camera here. This is Moncassin, not surprisingly left to do most of the work in that chase group now, because the Mappé boys won't want anything of that now, as we're on to zone number 11 for the 2 leaders. The time gap now officially of those 3 chasers is 52 seconds and 1:12 back to the next group. So the gaps are all coming down anyway, and these 2 riders, well, they're turning out to be somewhat heroes of the day here, because they have been in the lead for so long and they simply refuse to give up.
They certainly aren't giving up, and they've been on television for an awful long time this afternoon across Europe. Thierry Gouvenou's done a great ride this afternoon, one that he will be able to talk about for many years to come. Only 1 stage victory for him this year. That was in the Tour of Normandy just last month. And in fact, Normandy seems to be an area where he rides very well, because a couple of years ago he won a team time trial there known as the Trio Normand.
The Tour of Normandy used to be a very class amateur event, but now in this day of open bike racing, it's become a very good open race where a lot of good pro teams get a ride. Anyway, back to the chase group here now. Michael Rick has certainly had his ups and literal downs today, and so too has to be said for Franco Ballerini and also Tom Steele. Nobody gets through Paris-Roubaix today without a real story to tell of his own. And these are the boys now trying to hunt down. The last time check we had, 52 seconds. I'd go with that, because this looks like the same stretch of cobblestones we've just seen the 2 leaders on.
It certainly does, and I'm sure that once we come off this section of cobblestones, Tom Steele will do everything he can to try and help Franco Ballerini. And the 2 leaders now off the cobblestones, looking very comfortable. Ludo Dieriksen certainly has put a great performance in this afternoon, and we have to go back many years since there was a great surprise win. Men like Dirk de Mol have walked away after long breakaways with a victory in Paris-Roubaix, but for the moment the race is very much far from over.
Well, I don't think whoever won today, they would be classed in the same category as Dirk, who was a surprise winner after a breakaway totally misjudged by the chasing peloton. He was clear with Thomas Wegmuller of Switzerland. But today, anybody who wins this race will have richly deserved it. And not least these two riders here. They are not going to give up. They're going to make them fight every inch of the road to bring them back. And Gouvenou trundling that big gear now and giving a nice little spell there to Ludo Dieriksen. And Dieriksen not afraid to work with him either. Even though their lead has slowly diminished at one stage over the likes of Ballerini, it was almost 8 minutes, Paul, and let's not forget, probably more, because Ballerini has crashed and had to come back.
Certainly has. Thierry Gouvenou now taking up second position here. Used to ride for the GAN squad, which is managed by Roger Liggett, and he felt that he wasn't going to improve anymore, so he let him go, and he's now joined the Big Mat, a second division team in France. But certainly after this performance this afternoon in Paris Roubaix, a lot of people will be talking about him.
Now, is this Backstead we're looking at here at the moment? Not too sure where the camera's jumped to. Is it Stuart O'Grady we may have picked up on the road? I think it is Stuart O'Grady. Now, Stuart, we're not too sure where he is, but I think he was one of the original group of 20, which is again split up into small pieces, and this is Henk Vogel's. So they may well be coming across and trying to catch up here with Moncassin's group.
Certainly that would be a big advantage for the GAN squad, because chasing this group of 3 riders here with Franco Ballerini, Tom Steels and Michael Rick is a group of 4 riders, with 2 riders from GAN, Backstead and Moncassin, but sitting on the back of that group 2 riders from Mapei, Wilfred Peters and Andrea Taffy. So if those 2 GAN riders can get across, then they will be able to combine forces and pull back the 3 chasers.
Yeah, but look at this, Paul. Ballerini's just sitting there and he's just using all his power, and he started to hurt these 2. I'm not so sure how long they're going to stay with this man. Look at the gap there as Steels goes through. But Rick really couldn't close that gap. Now this will be Leon Van Bon, and then it must also be Rolf Sorensen here further down the road. Now they are trying to reach those cars in front, which I think contain the Moncassin group at the moment.
So it must well be that in fact Grady and Vogels are trying to catch these 2 riders who are trying to catch the 4 riders in front. This race is absolute chaos this afternoon. But amazingly, Franco Ballerini doing a lot of work trying to pull himself up to the front of this race here. He's getting a little bit of help from his own teammate Tom Steels there on occasion, but personally I don't think many riders can help Franco Ballerini this afternoon, because he's flying.
I have to say too that the French television are doing a tremendous job to try and keep us up to date here, because they, just like the riders, have had all sorts of bother today with crashes on the cobblestones, and yet they're trying to hold together what has to be one of the most competitive Paris-Roubaix for years.
Certainly no help at all at the front here for the 2 GAN riders, but that's only normal. That's team tactics. The 2 Mapei riders have one of their top hopes for victory in front of them, Franco Ballerini and Tom Steels, because he's still in there with a chance if the race survives to the finish as it stands at the moment. But Backstead doing a lot of work there for Frédéric Moncassin.
Now, Michael Rick, is he... I don't think he's actually working at all now. There's a little helping push there for Ballerini, so he gets in the line. That proves the point. Michael Rick, 2-1, don't go. And so he's actually not helping at all now. He's just following wheels, and I don't blame him. Steels, for my money, is going to work as hard as he possibly can till his body just says no more and will disappear. But you never know. It doesn't always work out like that. But right now he's just spelling Ballerini, and then Ballerini just fires through and he hurts them both again. He's absolutely flying right now.
Certainly a lot of pain there from Steels trying to recover. Roger Liggett shouting at Magnus Backstead, whose French not yet quite perfect, but I'm sure he's going to improve over the next couple of years. And in fact, it may well be he's got a slight problem. He's looking at his bike here and he's slowing down, and this will give the Rabobank riders behind a chance to come up to the group. You can just see the Rabobank riders just off the back there, and that may well be what Roger Liggett has told him. Sit up, boys, there are more reinforcements coming from behind.
And 2 Rabobanks coming up could take on the 2 Mapei boys here, who are being left to just tick over the speed right now until we get the arrival of Rolf Sorensen and Leon Van Bon.
Andrea Taffy there wearing number 17 is quite happy just to sit on the wheel of Moncassin, and what has happened is the 2 Rabobank riders, Rolf Sorensen and Van Bon, have come back into the frame. So that changes the whole picture of the race now, but still the 2 leaders are surviving.
Well, these two will have no idea the chaos that is now unravelling behind them over about 15 to 20 kilometres of northern France, because the race is spread over at least that distance now as the riders continue. Looking right up into the distance there, we can see the remnants. It's probably Vogel's trying to get across here.
In fact, that's Franco Ballerini's group coming across now with Tom Steele, so they've almost closed it down on the two leaders.
That's right. I've forgotten we got to the front then, Paul, but that's right. And these three are coming up now, so the gap was 52 seconds. It looks to be, what, 30 seconds now? And this is going to be an amazing chase back too for Steels and Rick, because they must have thought their chance of heading this race again had gone today. But up comes an express train in the form of Franco Ballerini and carrying them now up towards these two leaders.
Ludo Dieriksen must be very happy that he's changed off the smaller teams that he represented over the last few years and now riding on top of the first division squad Lotto. It gives him a chance to race with men like Andre Schmeel, and this afternoon he's certainly waved the flag for the Lotto squad. But now he must realise that things are about to change, because the race is becoming a much more critical event now, because the riders starting to come into the crucial closing stages of Paris Roubaix, and coming up from behind pretty rapidly indeed is Franco Ballerini, and not far behind a very strong group with Frédéric Moncassin.
And if they all get together, it'll be the status quo, and they'll all have to start and try and work out the tactics once more, because some nasty stretches of cobblestones very much still remain here as we get into the last 50 kilometres of the race. We've crossed the town of Atiche, and we're now heading down towards the next sector of Parvey.
These two riders still will not give up. They're still surviving. Looking over the shoulder now, they can see just at the end of the straightaway behind them Franco Ballerini, Tom Steels and Michael Rich. And they go in now to the next section, and it will be interesting to see just how powerful Franco Ballerini is, and if he's going to close it down personally on the two leaders.
Well, Rick is not at all happy on this section of cobblestones, and neither is Tom Steels. But you can see from the helicopter now, that's in the middle of the picture, is Ballerini. He has catapulted across. Tom Steele's off to our right, but Ballerini has flown and caught the two leaders. So we now on zone 10, with 10 more sections of cobbles to go, Paul. Ballerini has reached the front of the race.
What a remarkable comeback. But that's what Paris-Roubaix is all about. Never giving up, always keeping your morale. Even if you have bad luck, crashes, punctures, mechanical incidents, you always have to insist on going forward, continuing with the battle. And that's what Franco Ballerini has done now. He's fought his way back from a rear guard action after the Forest of Arenberg, picked his way right through the field, gone with the right groups, and now he's found himself right at the front of the race once more.
But he has been so immensely strong today. He has now put the two leaders, Gouvenou and Dieriksen, under pressure. It looks like immediately Gouvenou is cracking here. Dieriksen is hanging on just about, but Ballerini seems to have taken the conscious decision to go for home so soon.
Well, that's the thing you have to do when you ride for a squad like Mapei, because any one of those riders in that squad have a great chance. Tom Steels, he's done his job for the day. All he's going to do now is just try and get to Roubaix in a large group without too much difficulty, because there's still the World Cup rankings to think about in a race like this. You have to make sure that 3 riders from each team finish. Steels a long way back. There's Michael Rich. This is the section of cobblestones which takes them over the motorway, and in front of Rich there you can see is Thierry Gouvenou. So it looks as if Ludo Dieriksen is just hanging on for grim death onto the back wheel of Franco Ballerini. There are the two leaders now, and very shortly they should take that left-hand turn over the motorway bridge.
Well, he must have wondered what on earth came up to him here, but Dieriksen has done well to just hang on. I can't believe he's going to hang on for much longer, because Ballerini's looking for no help at all. Here's Rick picking up Gouvenou. So even Michael Rick, who has had his bad luck today, is still riding immensely strongly here. As in the distance there, we can see Tom Steels as well. Now they're also on zone 10. Ballerini's about to exit zone 10 here. Dieriksen no longer willing to work, if indeed he can, with the man from Mapei. The man, which is very strange, Francesco Moser is one of the other great Italians who love Paris-Roubaix, but there aren't many come from Italy who relish these cobbles like Franco Ballerini does.
Certainly don't. Italy have only won Paris-Roubaix 9 times before, and one of those men who took 3 victories was Francesco Moser. So it's not a race that normally smiles on the Italians, and it has been a love-hate relationship for Franco Ballerini over the last few years. In fact, when he finished second to Gilbert Duclos-Lassalle, he was beaten in a photo finish. He walked away from the stadium and said, "I'm never coming back to this race again," but he's been back every year since.
Absolutely, and well, today maybe he's going to repeat the win again, which he's had already once in this event. Now, there's the open cobblestone as our valiant cameraman today are rushing around like rabbits here to try and keep up with the way this race is fragmenting every few seconds. Ballerini now off zone number 10, takes a look to see who has still stayed with him. The answer is only Ludo Dieriksen, and a question of for how long, because we're now heading to zone number 9.
Well, Ludo Dieriksen did a good job there, surviving. At one time, he was 3 or 4 lengths just behind Franco Ballerini, and I was convinced he was going to crack. He knows how important it is now to try and stay with Ballerini, and he has done that. And there, Ballerini signalling to him, come on then, if you can stay with me, you can work with me.
I can't believe that Dieriksen can do anything right now, because this man has been in the lead since Saint-Quentin. And what Ballerini wants to do is make him work, fry him and leave him. And if Dieriksen's got any sense, he'll stay right where he is right now.
Well, in the back of his mind, he's probably thinking about Duclos-Lassalle, because Gilbert Duclos-Lassalle at that time was 39 years of age, and he played the, oh, I'm sorry, I'm a poor old man, I can't work with you. But when they got to the finish line, he just had enough strength to come by Franco Ballerini in that sprint. So I would think if Ballerini's thinking about going all the way to the finish now, he must certainly want to do it alone, and must, even though Ludo Dieriksen has been at the front of the race for a long time, want to try and get rid of him.
As we hit zone number 9, there's the other point too, Paul, isn't there? Because of the nature of this race with the cobblestones, you never know when bad luck comes to you.
You certainly don't, and there are still 9 sections of cobblestone still to go, as you said, and it could well be that he'll have Dieriksen sitting on his wheel for the next 10 or 15 kilometres. He'll build up a lead of 1 or 2 minutes over the chasing group, and then he could break his bike, so he would much rather try and find himself in the lead on his own, so that if there is any chance of a problem, he can recover nicely.
Well, we're on zone 9, and it looks as though Ballerini's content to set the pace, and Dieriksen still has the ability to follow here. He seems to ride his saddle very lowly, Paul, low down, doesn't he, Dieriksen?
He certainly does, but you can see the power of Franco Ballerini there, sitting on the bottom of the handlebars. He's got massive power in those thighs of his, and that's the only way really to ride over the cobblestones, to keep the speed up as high as possible, because you do float over the surface of these cobbles, and once you start to weaken, then you hit everyone. Well, that's a reaction by Mappé.
Yeah, as they come off the cobblestones here, they're trying to rid themselves now, the 2 Gann boys and the 2 riders from Rabobank, which I can't see at the moment, but I presume, oh, there they are, just tucking into our picture. So they are actually now, they almost as if they feel confident that Ballerini is going to win this race, and now they're trying to do a 1-2-3 like they did a couple of years ago, which I never thought we'd ever see again.
Well, Andrea Taffy there going on the front, having been led onto the cobbles by Wilfred Peters. What they're trying to do, I think, is put Frederic Moncassin under a little bit of pressure. Peters has drifted off the back there after that little acceleration of his. Frederic Moncassin with the black hair on the front, Magnus Backstedt in second position. And the 2 Rabobank boys not doing a whole lot of work in this group.
Well, Backstedt is a name I've never before mentioned in commentary, and today this man has been a true hero of the race, done so much for his teammate Moncassin.
He certainly has. He's been a great find, I think, for Gann. He was 4 times the champion of his own country at the time trial, but this is the way they went onto the cobblestones. That was Wilfred Peters trying to sort it out, and Backstedt now has been put to the front by Frederic Moncassin to do all of the work to try and pull him back into this race. And a great find he is for Gann, because not only did he win the Grand Prix of Isberg last year, but 2 years ago he won the Boland Bank Classic, winning a stage there, and that was the first time I saw him back in 1995, where he won 2 stages, and one of them he in fact rode away from the main field, which was made up of mainly professionals from TVM and Once, and he held a 20-second lead for the last 20 kilometres, and they couldn't pull him back.
Well, this nasty little stretch of cobblestones are sure to be swinging hairpin left to climb up to the main road on the left shoulder here. But Ballerini has managed to persuade Ludo Dieriksen now to get out front and do a bit of the work. And I don't blame him on this stretch of road. At least he can see where he's going. There's the hairpin bend, and there's the chase group as well. And the race now swinging back on itself here before it heads off to zone number 7.
So the race is still really on a handkerchief. Anybody could win. And if Franco Ballerini falters slightly, he's got 2 men in the chase group behind to pull him back into the fold.
Well, the Mappé have salvaged something out of this race. All they want now is the result. And despite the fact that Patrick Lefevre, so disconsolate coming out of the Forest of Orenburg, saying, I've lost my 2 top men. Well, he seems to have forgotten Tom Steels, Wilfred Peters, Andrea Taffy and Franco Ballerini, because those are the men who could still shape this race up for Mappé.
There's Thierry Gouvenou leading them round that hairpin bend with Michael Rich, and just a little bit further back I'm fairly sure we'll see the big chasing group now made up of the two GAN riders, two Rabobank riders, and the two riders from Mapei.
And there they are, some 7 riders here. Tom Steels hanging on the back. He's got rubber legs, I think, now. Tom Steels, the champion of Belgium, left-hand circuit here. And we're behind Tom Steels now as we hairpin ourselves away up to the top. And
there's a problem there. Phil Baxter put his hand up on that section of cobbles there. In fact, Tom Steels has got problems too, and that's with his gears. His chain has come off and he's trying to get it sorted out. And you can see there's always a helping hand here in the north of France here in Paris Roubaix to get somebody up and running. There's Baxter stopped on the right-hand side of the road. So that's a bad move there for Frédéric Moncassin because he's lost a big engine that was helping him.
Well, I think Baxter has punctured just as he came off the cobbles there, and we saw the chain was off from Tom Steels. He's got it back on, but he's in his highest possible gear here, and he's making my legs ache as he climbs up. There's what happened. His chain comes off as he came out of that corner, and all he can do is stop. And on the other side, you see, it is a flat tyre there as the Mavic service car gets up alongside Baxter. You just never know when bad luck strikes here in Paris-Roubaix, and now he has isolated Fred Moncassin.
And I think Tom Steels is a spent force there, bearing the sequel of his crash earlier on in that section of cobblestones near Mont-Saint-Pével. And I think all he can hope now is just to survive to the finish. The two leaders, though, still looking very comfortable. Dieriksen still able to feed himself, keep himself topped up with energy because there's still an awful lot of racing to go before the finish. And now Franco Ballerini not asking for any help, just happy to ride on the front and set the tempo.
The Italian-Belgian tandem here at the front. And he's through another nasty stretch of cobblestones, and behind now he'll be unaware that the chase group has been weakened by the loss of Baxter. I don't think it's been weakened by the loss of Tom Steels, because I think Tom Steels was weakened as it was. But these two riders now are still heading down for the last 45 kilometres of racing, and the only man left to worry about for Ballerini now, and he must be worried about him, Paul, Ludo Dieriksen, because Belgians, we know, are very tenacious bike riders.
They certainly are, and especially when it comes to a race like Paris-Roubaix, which everybody wants to win. It's not called the Queen of Classics for nothing. And so if Dieriksen can just sit on the back wheel of Franco Ballerini for a few more kilometres and keep eating and drinking as he was doing just a little bit earlier, he can recover. But Ballerini looks very concentrated. The face on him is just thinking about keeping the speed as high as possible. So he should make sure that he doesn't get into one of those zones where you forget and you feel that you are superhuman, you can ride anybody off your wheel, because if he gives Dieriksen the chance, he will do everything he can to recover.
And there's the signal he wants him back round again now. And in fairness, Dieriksen doesn't hesitate. He drives through and gives Ballerini a spell at the back. Well, I wouldn't like a Ballerini behind me right now, because you get the feeling this man is going to sprint away and put in a huge attack at any moment as we're heading up now towards zone number 7. Still 7 very, very bad stretches of cobbles to come.
Certainly is a huge rider. He's paid an awful lot of money by Mapei, and a lot of Italians say that he's not worth the money because he only wins a couple of races a year throughout his career. He's never been a major prolific winner. His first year in 1986 he didn't win anything at all. Then in 1987 he won one victory, 1998 one victory, 1989 2, and then he had a great year in 1990 with 5 wins. But since then he's been winning a couple of races here and a 1 race there, but never really the super winner.
But he's won some big races, Paul, and he's Mr. Consistent when it comes to the classics, because he's always in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th or 6th positions in these one-day classics. And he's had the lot in Paris-Roubaix. He's been a past winner, he's had 2nd, he's had 3rd twice. So he certainly knows this race inside out.
Two Mapei boys on the back of that group there looking happy. But this is it, and look at that. Franco Ballerini has dropped Ludo Dieriksen on this very long uphill rise.
Well, that's amazing, but he made him work, you see, and you could see on the face of Dieriksen he was suffering, and now he's turned the screw that little bit tighter, and we're on zone 7 here, and Ballerini is bouncing away on his own now. He still has the best part of 27 miles to go to the finish, and that to me is a long way. Under normal circumstances I'd say he's mad, but the way he's left this race spread-eagled, he's got to have a real chance now.
He certainly must feel confident, because that's about an hour and 10 minutes of racing still to go, and he's made a great comeback since the forest of Arenberg with 60 miles remaining. He's leapfrogged from group to group to bring himself back to the front of the race, so he's obviously used an awful lot of energy, but he will know every inch of the run-in now from here to the finish, because this rider from Mapei has ridden this race so many times before, but also in the last couple of weeks he will have been back here too to make sure he can check the cobblestones and see just exactly which way they're going, because nowadays the last 60 miles of Paris Roubaix is a very complicated affair with the high-speed train that's been built across this area. The race actually has to zigzag around north of France to look for cobblestone sections like this.
Well, look at the wet on the road there now as Michael Rick is at the front here. I think it's Leon Van Bon. No, it's not, who's trying to get up behind him. But you see, what's happened here now is it's every man for himself now. They're hardly riding in a bunch anymore as they pick their way through the mud here on the cobblestones. They'll almost be unconcerned about who is in the lead at the moment. It's a matter of survival.
I think Rolf Sorensen said it best before the start this morning when he said when you come to the final stage of Paris-Roubaix, it really is a question of every man has to ride for himself. Even though Magnus Baxted is doing what he can to help Frédéric Moncassin, it's a question of riding for yourself, looking after yourself, because all of these teams have been reduced in numbers. There's no such thing as teamwork anymore. It really is every man for himself.
And it's Baxted first, followed by Rick, followed by Sorensen. Thierry Gouvenou is back here now, so too. Just behind him we've got Fred Moncassin, so at least Baxted got back up to this group. It must have been quite a chase, and he's still strong enough to put the pressure on here as he's caught out Rick and Sorensen, but Moncassin quickly pedalling through. I'm going to try and give his young teammate a hand here, because I have to say Baxted's wonderful. And look over the back there, that's the remnants of that 20-man chasing group, and they're still in the picture.
They still are very much in the picture. This race is quite strange for the moment. We have Franco Ballerini going out on his own at the moment, but these groups behind only separated by about 30 or 40 seconds each, so the race could all still very much come back together. But I hope we don't get treated to a big punch sprint on the track in Roubaix.
It's unthinkable surely right now. Henk Vogels is back in that group, and if they could get across here, he'd be a good ally for the two boys from Gand in this chase group.
Michael Rick just cracked there on that section of cobblestones, but Thierry Gouvenou there in 5th position is really doing a storming ride. He's managed to get into the slipstream of the riders that have caught him up, and he'll hope that he can survive now over the section of cobblestones, because I would think that's the only place that he can get dropped on the cobblestone section, because that's where you really need to ride with all of your force. And on the back of that group of riders now, all of the time, the two riders from Mapei, they won't do anything at all now to the success of this breakaway. They'll just hope that Franco Ballerini can start to build up a little bit of a lead. And even if he does get caught, it'll be up to them to attack.
Fueling up for the last 40 kilometres or so to ride for Franco Ballerini. This, remember, is his 10th Paris-Roubaix. He's never failed to finish this event, and the majority of his finishes have been in the top 5 places. So Franco Ballerini now free as a bird. He's got rid of everybody. He's leapfrogged stage by stage till he caught the last rider, Ludo Dieriksen, who is now been dispatched backwards towards that chasing group. And there could be a regrouping behind yet. I don't think Franco would have chosen to make the move this early before the finish, but I think he's found himself left with absolutely no choice.
Hand up there is to call up his team manager, Patrick Lefebvre, who before the start this morning said that the two leaders for the Mapei squad were going to be Stefano Zanini and Johan Museo, and now he's going to say something to him like, well, I told you this morning you shouldn't have given it to me. That's Fabrizio Fabri, the other team manager, the Italian team manager there, as he takes on board some high energy drink.
And now he's settling down obviously for the big escape, and we haven't seen a big escape like this for some years in Paris-Roubaix, not by the single rider. This is the quality of the great Eddy Merckx now, and Franco Ballerini has wanted this, even though he has won it once, and he'll always tell you he should have already have won Paris-Roubaix twice, because he actually threw it away in the sprint finish, which was finally taken by Gilbert Duclos-Lassalle, who did also win it twice.
He certainly did. Well, Michael Rick has recovered there after being dropped on the cobblestones and pulled himself back into this race. These riders, these men who've been out since the 57th kilometre of the race this afternoon, really must be on a high to know that they're still in with a chance at the end of this very difficult Paris-Roubaix. A lot of discussion going on there between Taffy and Wilfred Peters. I wonder what they're thinking about.
Well, maybe they're going to plot the second and third finishes, because it's a possibility now that they could do what we thought you'd never see in a generation again, and that's one team claim the top 3 places, which Mappe did a couple of years ago when Museo won, and then it was Bortolami and Andrea Taffi. Bortolami, by the way, is still very much in this race and is coming up in the group behind the Moncassin group, and so he too is still in this race, along with Henk Vogels is in that group as well, and Christophe Capel. And Andre Schmil, we understand, has bridged to the second half of the chase group. We haven't seen him all day.
It's not been anywhere near any of the TV cameras, and another man who will have an awful lot to talk about tonight. But Paris Roubaix is about that. If you get a chance to act as a fly on the wall in the showers, every rider who finished this event has a story of woe about Paris Roubaix. The punctures, the crashes, the technical problems, and it always is something that these riders are proud of, to be able to talk about taking part in Paris Roubaix. And today I do feel, Phil, that this has been one of the great Paris Roubaix, because these conditions really are atrocious.
This has been a superb Paris Roubaix. We thought it would be because of the weather conditions these last 2 weeks, but these are the men who've made it so exciting, and Ballerini has been simply superb. It's a shame we couldn't have witnessed his chase across from the back groups, because they must have been quite spectacular.
He certainly must have been, but for the moment he's got to try and ride consistently, not push himself too hard now, because what he has to do now is dose his effort over the next 45 minutes of racing, because there's still a long way to go before we get to the finish. You can see how fast he's riding over these cobblestones. He's able to pick his way very carefully. He's all on his own, and he realizes that he's got 2 men behind, 2 very able lieutenants, to try and close down any counterattacks, but he must make sure that he doesn't push himself too hard.
Well, he's riding very, very strong at the moment and doesn't appear to be faltering at all. He's on a mission, and he's proved that to us today. He gets drawn to Roubaix like nobody else seems to be, and he hasn't ridden this race from the front. He's had to come from the back to do it, and when you do that, I somehow don't see him failing now, and we certainly wouldn't wish any ill luck on him. As we see another huge sector here with the crowds enormous. They always seem to know where to go, because they know where the crashes might happen, and they know the particularly vicious stretches of cobblestones. And this sector here, well, the water's on the right, but Ballerini's quite happy down the middle. Now, these riders here coming into sector 7.
Still it's Backstead on the front, Phil. He's doing a magnificent ride this afternoon, the Swedish rider on the GAN squad. All the time we come back to this chasing group, we can see the work done by the Swede, Magnus Backstedt. A real revelation, and a man who I think Roger Liggett is going to be very happy that he signed up to his squad. But interesting to note that Liggett has always been fairly interested in signing up foreign riders. He's never been one of the French team managers to stick with the French riders on his squad. He does have some, but he has an awful big group of expatriates riding for him. The Australians, Chris Boorman from Great Britain, and now Magnus Backstedt.
And the funny thing is, whereas you expect the riders to learn the language of the manager, in the GAN case, the manager's learned to speak English quite well, so he can speak to all the riders he's signed up.
He certainly knows how to look after them. I think all that goes back to the days when he used to manage Greg LeMond, and one of the few French managers at the time who actually took time out to try and learn the English language, because he realised how important it was going to be with the number of English-speaking riders coming into the sport. Franco Ballerini, by the way, doesn't speak English, only speaks Italian and French. And Patrick Lefevre, the team manager there behind in the Mappe team car, very fluent in the Italian language. So I would think a lot of communication going between these 2 men at the moment.
Now, this group we're looking at now, officially 1 minute and 42 seconds back. Somewhere ahead is Ludo Dieriksen, because he hasn't been caught to the best of our knowledge. And, of course, the leader on the road now is Franco Ballerini. This is the zigzag corner where we were on the ground when we went around the corner with Ballerini. And 1 minute and 42 seconds has slipped by since he went around this bend. 3, 6, 8 riders still here in this group. I've no signs of Tom Steele, so I don't think he recovered on that corner. He never got back up to the group. He stayed behind. He might well have been picked up by that Schmil group, which is coming up, but we've got no time checks on that group at all.
He must be pretty happy with 1 minute 42 seconds advantage over this group. Now, if he can just build it up to around about 2 minutes, then he can start to dose his effort a lot more sensibly and make sure that he can just maintain his advantage over the chasing group. Interesting though, Phil, it's still Backstedt on the front here, and it's nice to see that Michael Rick is still tagged onto the back of this group, as is the young French rider Thierry Gouvenou.
Well, they've both had a great day in Paris Roubaix today, and if they hang on for a bit longer, they're going to get a very high finish here. They could be in the top 15 on the day, and that's nothing to be sniffed at in Paris Roubaix. This is a real tough race today. Just look at the mud there on the wheels and the cranks of Franco Ballerini, who continues at a terrific pace here, because it looks to me, Paul, as though he's actually going quicker than that chase group right now. I think he's pulling away.
He certainly is flying. It's nice as well to get a chance to look at the machine that he's using this afternoon. Basically, it's a standard machine. There's no bells and whistles, nothing fancy, nothing modern. It's a basic carbon fiber Colnago machine. No suspension on the front, but a normal bike like Eddie Merckx would have won his Paris Roubaix on. So he will be very happy to see the return of standard machines to an event like Paris Roubaix. The reason that the Colnago team don't use the suspension forks is because Ernesto Colnago, the designer of these machines, will not have suspension forks or any changes done to his frames. He claims that he can build a bicycle which will ride comfortably over the cobblestones, and it certainly is this afternoon.
It certainly is, and if you caught a glimpse of that speedometer there on the motorbike, it said 50 kilometres an hour. That's 31 miles an hour he's riding on the flat roads here. Now, there's no way in the world that anybody's going to be catching him if he can hold that sort of speed.
That's the important thing for him to do now, is just to make sure that he rides sensibly. He'll be getting information from his team manager on a regular basis now, because right behind him in the team car, Patrick Lefebvre and the Italian team manager Fabrizio Fabri will be conferring. They'll be getting information from the race radio all the time coming up here to let him know just exactly what is happening behind. Fabrizio Fabri there on the right-hand side there, obviously consulting the television, because a lot of these team managers for the big classics, Phil, they actually have a television on board so they can see exactly what is going on in the race, and they can get a lot more information than they can from race radio.
You think they have better things to do when they're working than watch television in the car, wouldn't you? But anyway, they're going to be delighted, and I would think a little bit surprised at the way this race is turning out for them, because 200 kilometres ago they thought the whole race was through the window, and now they've got 2 in the chase group and 1 in the lead. Backstead will not give up, will he? This big Swede is pile driving this breakaway through again, and that's Leon van Bon behind him, then Moncassin, then Rolf Sorensen, and then Wilfred Peters, Taffy, Thierry Gouvenou and Michael Rick sitting there at the back.
Well, those 2 riders moving to the back a little bit more often than they were before. Now for them, it's just a question of survival. They realise now how far it is to go in Paris-Roubaix, and all they want to do is make sure that they can stay with this group till it gets to the velodrome in Roubaix, because that would be a great performance for them. They're looking at a top 10 position, and when they went out of the pack at kilometre 57 this morning, I don't think either of them thought that they would survive all the way till the end.
On to zone at number 6, and as we thought, in fact, Paul, it was 1 minute 42, but now Ballerini's lead is 2 minutes and 20.
That's remarkable. This is a very dangerous section of cobblestones too. You can see how much mud there is on the side of the road. It's only a short section of cobblestones, but it certainly is one of the tricky ones. And Ballerini is absolutely flying across here. He slipped his back wheel just a little bit there, and he's now back safely onto the smooth pavement.
A nice easy section, and it was only a couple of 100 metres, at 300 metres I think, and he's now 20 miles from the finish, 32 kilometres. And that, well, in theory, will take him around 35-40 minutes to cover at the sort of speed he's riding at.
Well, he's now got around about 4 miles to ride on the good pavement before he comes into the town of Sizouin, and that is where there is a very long section of cobblestones. And once again, when we went to look at it a couple of days ago, it was very muddy indeed, so that could be a point where the race starts to split up behind. Moncassin looks very comfortable, but I don't think he's got the power that his own teammate has got, and in fact he's just checking there on his heart rate monitor, so he's obviously going through a bit of difficulty.
Well, I hope it's good news, because actually this man doesn't look too dirty at all today. He looks like he's had a fairly trouble-free journey over the cobblestones. Oh, he spent an awful lot of time in the front, which is more to the truth, I think. Hasn't had to ride behind the back wheels of the riders. Look at Sorensen going through there. He's obviously been on the floor. Backstead's been okay. He looks a little bit ungainly on the bike, but nonetheless, he's certainly got a lot of power coming out of him. And up comes the team manager there with a little bit of information. Roger Liggett talking to Moncassin, and what he's telling him now is what we've just told you, that the gap has now gone up to 2 minutes and 20 seconds. And Roger Liggett, oh, he's come back. I thought he'd gone straight on there.
I thought he was looking for the shortcut to Roubaix there, not happy with the performance of his team, but it is a very a very difficult job the team manager has to do on a day like Paris-Roubaix. He has to negotiate not only the cobblestones, give information to the riders, but also pay attention to the way the road zigzags across the north of France. But Phil, look at this. Still at the back there, riding side by side, the two Mapei riders, Taffy and Peters, talking all of the time, discussing, trying to figure out exactly what the tactics must be going into the closing stages. And I'm pretty sure that they've had such an easy ride on one section of cobbles or another. In the future, they're going to put the hammer down and try and split this group.
Well, I wonder if you're right, and I don't think they'll want to incite anything from the group until they feel that Ballerini has the desired lead over them, which now is 2 minutes 20 seconds as they go on to zone 6 as well. Ballerini was well through this section now. This was the short section, you may recall, and it looks like Van Bon has been left to set the pace here now with Fred on his wheel. Actually, sorry Paul, it wasn't very far away from here. I'm not giving too many secrets away. When we're talking of cars, there was Roger Liggett. My driver turned us upside down, but he couldn't quite get round one of the corners at all.
He was very apologetic though, wasn't he?
He was,
said
yes.
There was oil on the road, I think, was his excuse.
Yeah, well, there was a camera on my head. But we all came through it well, and we got to interview the winner, who on that occasion was Jean-Marie Wampers of Belgium. And Wampers, by the way, is Flemish for diapers. And there was a few jokes about that, I seem to recall.
I'm sure he soaked up a lot of humour with that. But in fact, that was also the same section of cobbles. If you go back to CBS coverage of Paris-Roubaix many years ago, there was a magnificent crash by Theo de Roy going along there as he fell off in again, a very muddy Paris-Roubaix.
It was indeed, but the last few Paris-Roubaix have been mostly dust until we got to this great edition today. And I think Ballerini, if he gets to the end as the winner, will go down in the annals of history as one of the great all-time winners of Paris-Roubaix, certainly in post-war years, because this has been a tremendous show of strength.
He's now coming round the back of the town of Templeuve, and at a very short distance he will ride into the town of Sizouin, where the section of cobbles is that you can remember in 1994 André Schmiel was almost caught by Johan Museeuw, and then he cracked, had problems with his new pedals, problem with his new dual suspension bike, and had to change at the side of the road, and André Schmiel rode on to victory that day. But when you get there, that section of cobbles is still 26 kilometres to go before the finish line, and I'm fairly sure that Franco Ballerini knows that.
And if you think Paul Sherwen seems to know these roads remarkably well, well, he should, because he used to live in the area when he was a cyclist.
But I never used to ride over the cobblestones for training. I knew where they all were, and I used to do my best to try and avoid them. The only time that I would ride the cobblestones at Paris-Roubaix were actually in the event.
And I can't blame you for that. Also, by the way, if you ever get a chance to enter and ride, if you ever want to ride Paris-Roubaix, not the professional race, they have a randonnée or an Audax event here, where you can have a crack at riding the complete course on a different day, and many, many hundreds of cyclists do take up the opportunity. It's a fun day out, of course, until you have problems and you've got to repair it all by yourself. But then so did these bike riders 60 years ago.
They certainly did, and if you want to do that Audax ride, I'd suggest you do it on a mountain bike. It's a lot more comfortable.
Good point. Now back to the race here, and Franco Ballerini is still pile driving on. The latest time check, Paul, he's now over 3 minutes up, so he's just riding away from the field.
Well, I never would have thought that, a man going out almost 60 kilometres from the finish and building up a lead like this all the time, and he doesn't look at all as if he's starting to weaken. He's riding at a very good effort. He's making sure that he stays well within his limits. There's no pressure being put on him at all, and unless there's a major reaction comes from that group behind, this man is going to ride into Roubaix on his own, because he's riding sensibly, he's riding consistently, he's picking his way over the cobblestones very nicely indeed, and he knows just exactly how far it is to go. And I think for the moment there's no pressure at all on the shoulders of Franco Ballerini.
33 years of age, Franco turned professional back in 1986, 12 seasons ago. And he's still winning the best bike races in the world. And I think I'm safe in saying he'll win this, but a 3-minute buffer is a nice buffer now, because it means that he has got room for a puncture or a fall and a remount and still stay up in front. Now Moncassin still doing his share of the work here, with some help coming from the muddied Leon van Bon from his fall in the forest of Arenberg. And Backstead, well, he's looking tired now, but he still won't give up working.
He won't give up working, but you can't reproach him for looking tired, because he's done a monster share of the work this afternoon. He's always gone to the front. He's always been pushing to try and make sure he can bring his team leader, Frédéric Moncassin, back into the race.
And here again is a word of advice for Ballerini. But at this stage of the race, Paul, the fact he's pulling away, he knows how he feels, and he's feeling pretty good inside right now. He knows, he doesn't need to be told that he probably is pulling away from the race.
He certainly needs to be told, I think, because it's always good to have the idea, because he's all on his own in the race, nobody around him, nobody to give him concise information, and the fact that it's going up all the time will in fact boost his morale. It'll make him feel an awful lot more comfortable, and when it does start to hurt just a little bit, he'll know that he can back off, because he does have that buffer, which is now up around 3 minutes. Patrick Lefevre on the phone. I wonder if he's on the phone to Milano talking to Dr. Squincy.
Well, there was always the controversy a couple of years ago that the phone call actually arranged the result of Paris Roubaix when the three Mappe boys were out in front, Museu, Bortolami and Taffy. Well, there's no need to call up to arrange the result today, because there's only one. And Franco Ballerini looking pretty cool and comfortable out there now. He's through the town of Sissoin, and he's now heading round to the back doubles towards Roubaix.
He's a huge rider, a very big man, not at home when it comes to the big mountains of races like the Tour de France and the Tour of Italy, but once you come to these short, flat climbs that they have around Flanders or they have in Paris-Roubaix, he certainly does feel at home. He finished third overall in Tour of Flanders last year in what for him could have been a victory when he and Rolf Sorensen came up against Frédéric Moncassin. So certainly this Italian rider very much at home when it comes to these roads of the north of France and lower Belgium. And I think just in the corner there is Ludo Dirksen, so he's about to get picked up by this chasing group of 8.
You're absolutely right, there he is. So Dirksen, who has been out in front since Saint-Quentin, is now seeing the race for second place at the moment come by him, led by Moncassin. They know now there's only one man ahead as well. Now Dirksen looking for a back wheel, or is he going to go straight through and out the back door?
Tap on the head there coming from Andrea Taffy, is it? In fact, it was Wilfred Peters, the Belgian rider. He knows this man very well, and I think he's just saying, well done, great ride today, but we're here. Try and stay with us for the ride, because it could be fun.
I think you're right there, but it was nice to see that manoeuvre by Wilfred Peters. He appreciates a fellow professional's work today, as again all the work being done by the GAN teams with a little help from Van Bon and Rolf Sorensen.
This is the town of Sissoin, and that is the next section of cobblestones that Franco Ballerini will be facing. Just in the top there you can see the trees, and this is a very tricky section of cobblestones, not the same as it used to be a couple of years ago, because in fact it's split into two. There is some tarmac in the middle, and Franco Ballerini will know it very well. All of the riders really do have an intimate knowledge of Paris-Roubaix, because the ones who come here year after year are the ones who really want to ride this event. You can't force a rider to take part in Paris-Roubaix, because it takes a very special mentality to want to come and race it.
Well, Bernard Hinault is famous for criticising this event, and he said he rode it once to win it, so he could say he'd never ride it again. It was inhuman. And now he's part of the organising committee, so I'm not sure where he stands anymore. But we're now on the last 5, or the 5th of 5 stretches remaining now of the cobblestones, as we head now towards the finish, and 3 minutes 10 seconds, so he's still nosing clear.
It's still amazing to see this man pulling away from the chasing group behind, because that chasing group now is up to 9 riders strong, but he has the advantage of being able to pick his way through the cobblestones, and nobody's going to pull any time back on him on the cobblestone sections, because you cannot work together on these sections. It's a question of one man riding at the front and setting the pace for the whole group. So that is where the advantage is for Franco Ballerini. It's one man chasing one man. But up the road he still has some very serious sections of cobblestones that he has to come up to, and the one I think is the hardest is the one that's known as the Pavé Bleu, which then turns into the Pavé de l'Arbre, which is a very difficult long section where the race is very often decided.
Well, that is a particularly nasty section that they're on right now. I don't know if you noticed the wheel spin of Ballerini there, and I certainly take my hat off to our cameramen here who have to stay up with the leaders in Paris-Roubaix, skilled motorbike handlers they are. And you might note too that they wear the Paris-Roubaix uniform, our cameraman. Oh, he's looking at us now, because they're so proud of this event. There is a status, a symbol of getting that uniform on, because these cameramen are pretty special people, and they're staying with Ballerini now, who is continuing to pull away from the rest of the field. And just look at these cobblestones.
They really are atrocious, but he's riding over them with so much confidence. The advantage when you are in good shape and you have the strength is that you can still control your machine. Once you start to fatigue and you get a little bit of tiredness into the upper part of your body, then you don't have the agility left required that you can actually move the back end of the bicycle and control it when it starts to slip. And for the moment, everything is going right for Franco Ballerini. You can see here there's no movement in the upper part of his body, looking very strong indeed as he just floats onto the new pavement again. Chance for him to recover before the next section.
End of zone 5, just 4 sections remaining now. Time is running out for the race behind, and I don't think it matters an iota now. There they are just about onto zone number 5, and so the gap is 3 minutes and 15 seconds over the leader, who continues to pull away. And if you analyse this breakaway, really there's only 4 riders doing any work. The back 4 here are just watching.
And having a bit of a hard time there was Thierry Gouvenou, the big Mat rider on the back. And that's right, there's only 4 riders who are prepared to chase at all in this group, the 2 men from Rabobank and the 2 riders from Gann. And I would think that shortly is going to be down to 3 men, because the work that Magnus Backstedt has done must mean that surely he can't have all that much energy left in his legs.
And there he is in 4th place, concentrating, trying to relax a little bit, but it's not easy, as Rolf Sorensen pulls a pretty face at the front of this race, bouncing through the cobbles and over the mud. Now the riders letting the gaps form between the wheels as they start to plot their own course through this very tricky section. Back up at the front here, Ballerini. You can tell by this man's face that it is all happening for him today, and this is going to be a marvellous performance.
Well, in fact, when he was beaten by Gilbert Duclos-Lassalle, he was riding Paris Roubaix like this. He was so strong, so confident, but he had the Frenchman all of the time sitting on his wheel. He had exactly the same power as he has today. His advantage this afternoon, though, is there's nobody behind him except around about 3.5 minutes down the road.
Yes, and I think he probably, as you say, Paul, it went through his mind about Duclos when he had Didrikson on his wheel, and that's why he decided to rid himself of the Belgian. He wasn't going to take or make that mistake twice. Now the chase group, by the way, they seem to be spread now. It's over nearly 5 minutes now back to the 3rd group on the road, and 3.5 minutes back to that chase group. So he's pulling away from everybody, and surprisingly, it's a big chase group. They're not catching up with the group being led by Sorensen.
This race really now is becoming a question of survival at the front. Looks like
that's certainly survival on that bend. They're ever so frightened of that corner.
Well, it's a bit tricky, a little precarious as you turn right after these. The 2 sections of cobblestones outside Cizoin as they move around the corner there. That was Van Bont taking them round, and a very tricky section. And I think you're right, you can almost see the difference in the speed. Ballerini was flying over these cobblestones, and now I think this group really is just trying to survive and make sure that they don't have too many incidents.
Well, they certainly seem to me to be losing the impetus here. I think the fact it's Franco Ballerini, all these riders know him. They know his reputation in Paris-Roubaix, and there might be a psychological problem here. They may well feel that this man can't be stopped today right now. End of zone number 5 for them too.
The only thing they can hope for now that he cracks, he has some kind of glucose exhaustion, he forgets to eat because of the excitement of being at the front of a race like this. But the thing with Franco Ballerini, he's too experienced a professional. He's been professional since 1986. He knows how to react under conditions like this, and he knows that he has to keep eating, he has to keep drinking to keep his energy levels topped up to the maximum. He's also in a great situation, riding well within himself, because now, as he's riding fairly sensibly, his lead is still increasing.
Well, as we watch the legs of Ballerini, here is a little bit of information which I've just worked out, Paul. He rides number 12 in the race. The date today is the 12th of April. Last night he stayed in room 12 in the hotel. He attacked on Parve number 12, and it's his 12th season of racing. Now, are you superstitious?
I hope he doesn't finish 12th.
Well, that's a good point, but I think there's no danger of that right now.
That's a very good statistic there, and I think Franco Ballerini probably is very happy that he doesn't have number 13. Number 13, in fact, is worn by his own teammate Bart Leijzen.
And so far, as we know, he has punctured, in fact, Ballerini. We didn't see it, it was very early on, but he looks as though he's not having any problems at all. He's got the right tyres on today for the conditions. He's now on a nice smooth stretch road. He's crossing towards pavé number 4, and so he's got about a 3-mile gap between the two. That was when he came off pavé number 5, but it's a lot closer now.
It certainly is. The group behind now, you can see, organising themselves, but still only 3 or 4 riders working at the front. Michael Rick tagged on the back there, very happy to be there, and I would think really surviving to stay in contact with that group, because those riders have had a long day at the head of affairs.
Well, it must feel like now he's on a wide open freeway here after all the narrow roads of the cobbles. and probably quite pleased to be here as well. Chance of settling again to around about that 30-mile-an-hour time trialing mode of his. He looks so solid today, Ballerini, as springtime comes to this part of northern France. A little bit behind because of the cold snap that they've had. And
this is the left-hand turn onto the next section of cobbles, Phil. I remember that from this little farm on the right-hand side there. Every bike rider in the north of France knows that farm because they know you come along a big, long section of road and then you turn left. And this, in fact, is a pretty sticky section of cobblestones too. It climbs up. It doesn't look like it here, but it really is a hard section of cobblestones. You climb up here to the top, turn right, and you've still got an awful long way before you get back onto nice, smooth roads again.
And I think we went past the banner that said 20 kilometres to go, so about 12 miles to battle to the finish now.
And I wonder what's going through Ballerini's mind right at this moment, because when he jumped away, he can't really have believed he could ride to the finish all on his own. But as closer he gets to the finish, he must be getting a lot more confident, especially now that the gap is now approaching the 4-minute mark. He's nudging one of the biggest margins, I think, for many years.
Well, he had no choice at the end of the day. He had to go because that group was coming up behind. And by the same token, you know, even though he's on the same team as Taffy and Wilfred Peters, I think he'd be almost afraid of them as well, because there are two more riders who want to win Paris Roubaix, and this man is possessed by this event, and he wanted to make sure it was his today, and I think it will be now.
Certainly riding with a little bit of anger, I think, too, in his legs, that Patrick Lefevere didn't give him full confidence at the start this morning, putting confidence in the Mapei squad, mainly in Stefano Zanini, the leader of the World Cup, and Johan Museo. And so I think for him it's also sorting out the accounts of the team as well, to say, look, when I say I'm good for Paris-Roubaix, I mean it.
Yes, and I don't think, well, Museo's now out and gone to hospital, but Museo would never come clean and say he would help Ballerini at all, which left a big question mark over who would have won this race if Museo was still in it. Now, a little bit of ballet dancing here on this bend, because the cobblestones have almost disappeared beneath a cake of mud. But he gets round it nicely, the crowd enjoying the spectacle, and he's okay. He's onto dry road again, he's up and running. The news on Museo, by the way, is he's got quite a nasty cut on his knee, and he's had a number of stitches in it, but he is still in hospital.
Well, that's a sad day for Johan Museo, because that bad knee is going to put him out for quite a few weeks to come, and that is a shame, because the form that he had last week, I actually thought he could win Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix, because he just rode away from everybody last week in the Tour of Flanders, and the form that he had from the week before when he won those 2 races in Belgium certainly showed that it was the big Johan Museo of old.
Absolutely right. Recovered from when he was the world champion, and he only won a few smaller races, and he had bad luck in all of the big races. Well, this rider's got no thoughts of whatever happened to Museo today now. He's thinking of what might happen to him if he can claim a second cobblestone trophy to take back home to Italy. And he's knocking off all the pavé, and he's riding them like they are smooth road. He's just dancing over the top today.
Certainly no signs of weakness in Franco Ballerini going over these cobblestones. As you can see how relaxed the front part of his body is. What he does here is, in fact, he doesn't hold the handlebars very tightly and tries to steer the machine. He allows the machine to go where it wants to go, and his hands are really there just for the final control. That is why he is such a great rider when it comes to going over these cobblestones. The speed is high, the suppleness is there, he isn't tired at all, and he lets his bike go where it wants to.
Now, these boys are approaching that nasty stretch of cobbles, and it'll be interesting to see how they get round that right-hand bend.
It certainly will, but I think that may be the section of cobbles where the riders have been at the head of the race for an awful long time, may well be put into difficulty, because it's a long section of cobbles, and as you saw before when Franco Ballerini went along there, it is slightly uphill, and that may be why Andrea Taffy's come to the front now, because he wants to get rid of 1 or 2 of these passengers.
Well, past the farm that Paul mentioned earlier, and now this nasty stretch of cobblestones, an ideal place for strong men to have a go. Michael Rick doesn't look too strong sitting at the back now, and in fact Dieriksen has also slipped away here under the impetus of Taffy. Taffy is a vastly underrated bike rider. He really can produce some terrific races.
He certainly can. He won his first professional time trial victory this year in the Tour de Langkawi, and he held the lead in that event in Malaysia until the penultimate day, when his own teammate Gabriel Misaglia took him off him in a very dramatic climb up to a place called the Genting Highlands.
Well, maybe word has reached Taffy that he's free to do a little bit of work now to make this group much smaller, because the gap is almost 4 minutes now to Franco Ballerini, nobody else in front, and so Taffy now might want to sort of reduce this group and strengthen his own chances and that of Wilfred Peters of a higher finish at Roubaix. The last 3 sections of the pavé today for Franco.
Well, this is the section I was telling you about before called the Pavé Bleu. They really are a very difficult section of cobblestones. They call them the Pavé Bleu because that means blue cobblestones. They're a very hard granite, and in situations like this, they are very slippy indeed. He's picking himself across them very easily, and once he gets around a couple more corners, he goes onto the section then known as the Pavé de l'Arbre, where in years gone by, a lot of riders have launched themselves to success, and he will realise that when he comes to the end of this section, he has 17 kilometres left to go to the finish.
I think this is the stretch a few years ago when Jonathan Boyer launched himself into the field. He made a spectacular crash, and that videotape was replayed many times. And Jonathan now retired, of course, and Franco Ballerini, well, I suppose he's not too far away from retirement himself, but he's going to go out now with certainly 2 wins in Paris Roubaix under his belt.
Just flicking across there to get onto the path at the side of the cobblestones. Ballerini still looking very comfortable, still looking very confident as he picks his way across these cobblestones. But you can see all of the dampness that has come onto the course, a lot of that from the mountain bike race yesterday and the cars and the press vehicles that have gone ahead of today's Paris Roubaix. But Ballerini safely through there. Once he gets to the end of the section here, he'll take a left-hand turn and then he'll climb up to the little cafe of the Arbre.
17 kilometres, if that left to go now for Franco Ballerini. The cobblestones as bad as ever. There's the gendarmerie guiding the riders through the sections of cobblestones. Certain areas are banned to all followers except team vehicles, so not even the press or the television can get down these roads because of the fear that should they have an accident or break down, the race itself would be blocked. And the way clear now for Franco Ballerini. His face giving nothing away here as he bounces over these cobblestones. Remember, he's broken away with something like 25 miles to go on his own. He's dodging this one a little bit, Paul. He's having to hold his bike up because the ground now is absolutely atrocious as Ballerini heads towards the end of zone number 3, which will leave him just 17 kilometres to go. And I don't blame you, Franco. Take it easy.
Certainly, what he was trying to do there was stay on the crest of the cobblestones because it was just a little bit drier than the cobbles on either side of it. But the problem is, to do that, you have to take 1 or 2 little risks, and because of the camber, you can get loss of traction in the front and the rear of the machine. So Ballerini there precariously picking himself over the top of the cobblestones. You can just see the little crown there, which is where Ballerini is riding now.
Well, he flashes by. The lead car looks close, but in fact it's an optical illusion. He's not that close to the leader here. Ballerini hasn't put a wheel wrong on this course today, not that we know of anyway. He's riding with such confidence. They've dried out a little bit the cobblestones just here. The crowd enjoying the spectacle as they lean forward to see Ballerini. Remember, they've listened to this on radio or watched it on television before they've come into view, so they know who's coming at them. And Ballerini, although he's Italian, is a very popular personage here.
He certainly is. Any rider who performs well consistently in Paris-Roubaix and the Tour of Flanders endears himself not only to the French from the north of France but also to the Belgians. The flags will be out from all the countries of Europe over the next few kilometres waving for Franco Ballerini. And you know what, Phil, it looks as if he's getting stronger as the race is going on.
Time checks are still increasing. He's nibbling up now to nearly 4.5 minutes at the moment. And this is a long stretch of cobbles here, just over 2 kilometres in fact. So even at the end of the race, Roubaix will not lie down. But Ballerini just seems to be getting quicker and quicker. The Belgian flag flying won't worry Franco. He's seen plenty of Italian flags amongst this crowd as well.
He certainly has. This is the end of the Pavé de l'Arbre as he makes the right-hand turn. Not a very short rest for him on the smooth pavement before he turns left onto the next section of cobblestones, but a long flat section here, and then he'll be heading down towards Gruzon, and he'll be feeling a lot more confident now because he's well inside 20 minutes to go to the finish.
He knows now that it's not much longer, and he'll also be relishing very shortly the thought of entering a stadium packed with enthusiasts, a totally free spectacle. Nobody's charged to go into the Roubaix Stadium, and it is packed out with people. They're watching it from the centre on a huge screen, and they're cheering every move already. It's a real atmosphere in the stadium.
He's pretty confident, Phil. The way he went round that corner there, he hardly slowed down at all. He leaned into the corner as if it was a dry section of cobblestones, kept his speed high, and now on the drier section he's using all of his power to pick his pace up again to around about 45, 46 kilometres an hour. Ballerini very confident indeed the way he's riding over these cobblestones, and still there's no signs of weakness in his shoulders at all. Getting stronger as the day goes on. Really going to be a great win for this man, because barring a break of his machinery, I don't think that anything is going to stop him riding alone to the victory in Paris Roubaix.
Well, this time on, a kilometre of cobbles, rather a cruel little section this. They all call it Zone 3. In total, it is 3.3 kilometres long.
Taffy at the front here, still trying to cause a little bit of damage in that group behind, but shadowing him, Frédéric Moncassin, and right behind there, moving up, is Wilfried Peters.
This looks like crunch time for this group here, because in fact those three have got themselves a gap. Van Bon and Sorensen. Sorensen at the front at the moment, Van Bon at the back of these three. Backstead surely is just about on his limits now. Moncassin has tried to get in touch with the two Mappé boys, but there could be big trouble for Fred here, because he's got both of them. In fact, as I speak, this looks like an attack from Wilfried Peters going.
Peters, in fact, just trying to stay in contact there
right.
with the pressure on the front here by Andrea Taffy. Moncassin taking a lot of risks there, going right through the gutter, flicking across now to the wheel of Wilfried Peters. Peters has decided that he's going to take up the pressure and try and crack Frédéric Moncassin. A little bit of touch of shoulders there. There's no love lost between these boys. They've been sitting on for the last 30 or 40 kilometres, but that is their right. Their man Franco Ballerini is leading the race, and it certainly does look as if this group has cracked.
Well, they got round that corner. Moncassin wrestling his bike a little bit, but he's a fair good mountain bike rider, is Fred Moncassin as well, and so he's a good bike handler. But right now he's got his hands completely full here with the two Mappé boys, because they've both got in front of him now, and it looked in that flash of the camera there that they're beginning to get rid of Fred Moncassin here. This is a serious move to give Mappé 1, 2, 3.
Well, they're going for it now. Look at Wilfried Peters. He's really got the hammer down. Almost on his wheel is Andrea Taffin. They've got the gap that they were looking for. They knew the danger man was Frédéric Moncassin. They had to get rid of him before the finish if they were going to try and repeat their success of a couple of years ago. That's finishing first, second and third. But now they've still got 17 kilometres to go for the finish. So if I was Fred, I'd sit up now and wait for the Rabobank boys behind.
I think he's no choice, Paul, because they're catching him, and the two boys up front. Well, I'm really not a betting man, but had I been, I would have said you would have never have seen Mappé take 1, 2, 3 in the Paris-Roubaix again in lifetime. They did it in 1994, when incidentally Ballerini was 5th on that occasion, almost giving them a top 4 finish. But now he's in the lead, and Peters and Taffy are going away from what is a very tired chase group, and there's no one else near these riders at all now, because the next group on the road is some 2.25 minutes behind.
Well, Taffy taking a lot of risks down the side there to get onto the smoothest part of the road to try and pick up just a little bit of extra speed. But once he started to slow down, Wilfried Peters comes over to help him out and try and build up an advantage over the rest of that group. They've laid now already round about 10 seconds over the group with Frédéric Moncassin.
Well, Fred, I think, found his hands full there. He didn't know what to do. He tried to hang on, but they really did work him over, and he lost his wheel a little bit. They chose the bad section of cobble. This, of course, is the advantage of going and taking a good look at the course. And if you're in a position to win this race, you know when you can put home the vital attack. They're now on to the second segment of zone number 3. This is a kilometre long.
Certainly is a very long, hard section of cobblestones, but when Mappé finished first, second and third a couple of years ago, they got an awful lot of criticism in the press, especially from Jean-Marie Leblanc, the organiser of the Tour de France and of course Paris-Roubaix, by saying that they manipulated the result of one of the great classics. Well, the way this race has played itself out today, even if they do finish first, second and third, I don't think anybody can criticise the way they've ridden.
That's absolutely true, and this man has deserved his victory today. He'll have a great story to tell the press at the end of it, and he won't be blaming Johan Museeuw for anything like foul tactics and not helping him win the race, because poor old Johan is currently in hospital with his crash.
Been taken to a small hospital just across the border in Kortrijk, where in fact information coming to us that he's actually broken his kneecap, and that will put him out for an awful long time, especially at such a late age in his career. So that is a shame, because Museeuw had fantastic form. But these two riders now certainly have got a fight on their hands, because that group behind, once they get onto the smoother sections of roads, will organise themselves and try and pull back the two Mappé riders. But you have to not forget, Phil, that these two men have been sitting at the back of that group for an awful long time now.
Well, if you can have fresh legs at around about 260 kilometres covered, then these guys have got them. But they've left behind some very tired bike riders, and it's amazing how this race has swung round in the favour of Mappé, when really by midway through it looked a total disaster for them.
Certainly did. Patrick Lefevre was almost devastated by the fact that he'd lost the two men who he counted on to be the best performers in today's Paris-Roubaix when Stefano Zanini and Johan Museeuw went down in the forest of Arenberg. But that's what this race is all about. The tide can turn, luck can change, and that's exactly what has happened here to the Mappé team, because everything looked to be going wrong, and now the ball has changed, the shoe is on the other foot, and they're riding on the crest of a wave.
And this man here knows, because he knows this course as well as just about anybody from Belgium or France, that he is now running down towards the last couple of segments of Pavé and then the run into town. There'll be that nice ride down to Roubaix Stadium and then into an enormous ovation, I would imagine, here at the finishing line.
The next two sections of cobblestones are not really a whole lot to write home about either, because the penultimate section near Hem has got a long piece of tarmac road down the side of it, so you do get a chance to actually get off the cobblestones and not have too much of a jarring. And then the final section, really just before the stadium, is very much a section of cobblestones which was put down really as a memento to Paris-Roubaix, and it's just outside the stadium itself.
And the trees still waiting to blossom out fully, as spring takes a while in coming to this corner of France. Nice stretch of smooth road now, and this is where Ballerini all of the time is making ground, but the two chasers are also getting clear of the rest of the race as well, so it really is now possible. Look at the long space now between these two. Once clear, Taffy and Peters have combined into team time trial mode here.
Well, that's the great thing about getting away with a teammate towards the end of a race like this, because if these two men were on separate teams, there would be a little bit of reticence to work full out, because you would always be thinking about the other man saving a little bit. But at the moment, these two riders, they know that they've got Franco Ballerini at the head of affairs, and they will give 110%, because it doesn't matter which one of them finishes second or which one finishes third. It is a team effort, and they will do everything they can to hold off the group which was behind, starting to come back together a little bit. The two riders from Gan and Rabobank doing most of the work at the front, but nobody is doing anything at all to pull into the advantage that Franco Ballerini has over the field.
Well, Ballerini is 10 kilometres from the finish now, and the chasers are just on 12, so there's almost a 2 kilometre gap between them, and that should do it. But as you say, Paul, Taffy himself was not happy when told he was third finisher in the Mappé team a couple of years back in that 1-2-3. And so I think now the decision will be, those two riders, should they come to the stadium together, is may the best man get second.
Another man not happy with that 1-2-3 of Mappé was Gianluca Bortolami. In fact, he left the team at the end of the year and went to ride for the Festina squad, and it certainly was a lot of discussions about whether they should have been forced to sprint it out, but at the end of the day, if they had raced straight, I still think Johan Museeuw would have come out the winner.
I would agree. Museeuw is a brilliant classic rider, and this man is going to be on the par with him now. His first big result came in Paris-Roubaix, really, when he finished 5th in 1991. And since then, he's had a second in 1993, a third in 1994. He won it in 1995. He was 5th in 1996. And now he looks to be back on the winning trail again.
Well, this is the penultimate sections of cobblestones, just outside the town of Hem, and you can see he's keeping away from them as much as he can. I think he's had his fill of cobbles this afternoon, and this in fact is the section of cobblestones where Henny Kuiper nearly lost Paris-Roubaix when he won it. In fact, because when he came to the section, just at the end of the section here, he was flicking across from left to right, as all of these riders do to keep on the smooth pavement, and he just clipped the cobblestone line there, as you can see it, and he ripped his back tyre off, and in fact the tyre got stuck between the frame and the gears, and he was absolutely panic-stricken. So was the mechanic, because the group was only about 20 seconds behind, but fortunately for Henny on that day, they managed to get him a new bike and they managed to get him up and running again, and he went on to win that Paris-Roubaix.
Henny Kuiper, a man who won a lot of good bike races. Never quite won the Tour de France, but 2 second places, and he was the world champion, and he also won an Olympic gold medal in Munich.
Certainly a very long and illustrious career, and if he didn't win too many of the classics, the 4 that he did win were certainly the best ones.
Absolutely. Now, Taffy's won a classic in his life. He's won a couple, actually, as he sits on the back wheel of Wilfred Peters, who is one of the strong men of the Mappé team and rarely gets the result at the end because he works so hard for his squad. Well, today, he's either going to finish second or third in Paris-Roubaix because the group behind is losing ground. They are now 25 seconds behind.
And I would have to say, talking about Wilfred Peters, a lot of people said that Sean Yates was one of the most desired domestiques on the circuit when he was racing. I would think now the man that everybody would like to have in their squad is Wilfred Peters, because that man is certainly worth 2 bike riders, because he's so powerful and so dedicated to the team that he hardly ever thinks about his own performance.
Yes, I couldn't agree more on that score. Around one of the big roundabouts here now. The area, of course, totally closed down for the arrival of Paris Roubaix, an event which continues to get higher and higher in the public's imagination. First was held back in 1896 when Joseph Fischer of Germany was the winner. In those days, by the way, they used to have bicycle riders as pacemakers. They used to pace the riders and then drop out, and fresh ones would pick up the pacemaking.
That's exactly what Andrea Taffy's doing here to Wilfred Peters. Taffy on the front there with the blue knee warmers, keeping himself warm up against the cold that the riders have had to encounter throughout this afternoon. And you know, they're not actually opening up quite a big gap over the chasing group behind. It's hovering around about the 20 seconds. So despite the fact that they've been sitting on that group for most of the afternoon, there's still a big reaction coming from behind.
That's right, they are not pulling away now. They've got the gap for sure, but they are not pulling away. And if you remember last year, the breakaway that was swept up just out of sight of the cameras as they swung into the stadium, and that's likely to happen again. Wow, and that was nearly down on the ground then for the rider in the front, which was Taffy. It's Peters, wasn't it, at the front?
It certainly was Peters. These two riders very much resemble each other, and the speed that they're going over these cobblestones at the moment, it's a question of you go to the front and I go to the front. Everybody sharing the work. They realise, because they can probably hear the crowd a little bit further back cheering on this group, which has the best placed Frenchman in it, Frédéric Moncassin, there in 4th position. So they know that they haven't opened up the gap that they wanted to, and if they don't give everything at the moment, as you said, it could all come back together right to the entrance to the stadium.
Well, Fred has lost the shot of what he always wants, and that was a top 3 finish in Paris Roubaix. At the moment, it's gone from him. He won't be happy with anything less. And despite the teamwork by his young mate Backstead, well, it's 4 kilometres to go now for Franco Ballerini, and the sun, ironically, is coming out to welcome this man into the stadium. He's now looking for the first time a little bit tired, but he must know that there's nobody going to catch him.
A very tough part of the course here. You think it's flat in the north of France here, but this little climb just outside of Hem is where many riders have launched themselves on their way to victory in Paris-Roubaix, and it is a real sting in the tail. This, in fact, is where Jan Raas blew everybody away when he went to win his Paris-Roubaix, and the last man able to stay with him was Stefan Mutter, and he just kept attacking and attacking till he eventually cracked him. But today, that is not the case for Franco Ballerini. All he has to do is just get to the summit of this climb, and then it's a real coast down to the finish line, and a great crowd waiting for him here in the Velodrome.
Paul's memory going back there to 1982 with Jan Raas, who eventually beat Yvon Bertin in the stadium. And Jan Raas now the manager, or the senior manager indeed, of the Rabobank team. He doesn't take too much of a part in the team cars these days, but he's pulled together a superb sponsorship, not just for pro bike riders, but it goes right down to school kids. Anyway, these two riders now still hovering around about 4¼ minutes behind their team leader on the road, Ballerini, but only about 20-25 seconds ahead of this group here, which is the Gans and Rabobanks versus the Mapei.
Well, it's an amazing race, Phil, because really, if you think about it, over the last hour of this afternoon's race, only 3 teams have got any publicity at all out of Paris-Roubaix. It's been Gan, Rabobank and Mapei. They're the only people we've seen. Franco Ballerini looking a lot more comfortable now, getting himself dressed up for what's going to be a magnificent reception for him as he cruises down off the top of that climb just outside Hem, and he's now in the suburbs of Roubaix.
All of a sudden, he feels confident, I think, zipping up his racing top, getting ready for the approach to the stadium. A super crowd here in Hem, and very shortly they'll be down a last small section of cobbles, almost symbolic, about 100 metres of it, in fact 300 metres of it just before the finish, and then he'll be on his way into town.
There's a picture of Dirk de Mol marking the final roundabout before we get into the stadium of Roubaix. De Mol from just over the road here in Curt. A great win for him in that year's Paris-Roubaix, but it didn't actually finish here. It finished a few miles away at the offices of La Redoute, the great mail order catalogue that sponsored one of the great teams of the 1980s, which happened to ride for.
That's right, called Narrated, I believe. In 1988 was Dirk de Mol's win, and the prize money then was round about $25,000, and pretty similar to what it is today, actually, though it's probably worth a bit more in those days. Anyway, now we're coming towards what will be the kilometre kite very shortly for Franco Ballerini. He will flick off this side of the road. Yes, indeed, he says, and he has deserved this richly today. He'll shortly go into the central reservation and make the last stretch of cobblestones down the middle of the road, and then he'll turn into the stadium, and boy, he'll feel good.
It's almost a smile on his face now. He's been away for about an hour and a half. Quite remarkable. I never thought that a man would try and get away from the rest of the field 60 kilometres from the finish of a race like Paris Roubaix, but he obviously knew himself. He knew he was in a great day, and besides, he's riding for the #1 team in the world and knew he would get an awful lot of help from his teammates behind.
So Franco Ballerini now on final approach here, heading into what they call the Espace Croupelant, which is the central reservation that they open up just for the arrival of Paris Roubaix, and where they have laid cobblestones for the riders to race over. There's the switch coming up now. He'll go under that little archway. He knows now nobody is going to touch him. Here we go, and there's the cobblestones, just to remind you that this is Paris Roubaix approaching its climax yet again, and Franco Ballerini continuing his tremendous list of finishes here in this great race.
Nobody can say that the cobblestones are too far from the finish to affect the event, because they're just around about 200 metres away here from turning into the stadium. Every bike rider knows this finish here. You swing right into the entrance of the stadium, another turn to the left, and one more right-hand turn, and you're actually on the velodrome.
And wait for the roar, because the crowd can see him coming in on the big screen. He's already waving to the handful outside the gates, but inside it's a full house because it's a free spectacle, Paris Roubaix. And look at this now, Ballerini left himself all the time in the world, the man that came from the back to the front and then left himself with no challengers in the 1998 Paris-Roubaix. And this is going to be a huge winning margin indeed, and the time will prove it, but I think we're going to go back to the halcyon days of Eddy Merckx when anybody has come in with a lead like this. The crowd are cheering him all the way. One lap to go for Franco Ballerini. No Gilbert Duclos-Lassalle to take the prize off him this time. He's going to win it clear on his own. And it looks like, Paul, it's going to be a 1-2-3 as well.
Well, it certainly will. I think if those two riders behind don't ease up over the last few kilometres, they should survive the onslaught of the chasing group. But Franco Ballerini has certainly put in one of the most magnificent performances in Paris-Roubaix over the last few years. To go out 60 kilometres from the finish alone, pick yourself back up from being so far behind in the forest of Arenberg, that really is a magnificent race.
It was a gamble of which I don't think he had any choice at all. He was so strong when he got there, he had to push it home, and he's done it now brilliantly. Coming round the stadium and doesn't have to worry about a sprint. He looks across to see if anybody else is entering the track, but they're a lap and a half behind anyway if they are. Franco Ballerini gets what I rate as the best win of his career today in Paris-Roubaix. He's going to freewheel right around the back, where by tradition his helpers will be waiting. Back out on the course though, the race now for second and third. Mappe are going to do a 1-2-3 for the second time. They did it before in 1996, and only one rider is in that same 3-up sprint, and that's Andrea Tafi.
On that occasion, he finished third. He was told by the team direction that that was the order they were going to go across the finish line. Johan Museo, Bortolami and Andrea Tafi, but now he's a lot more confident. And in fact, it looks as if he's starting to play a little bit of a tactical game here, because he's forcing Wilfred Peters to make the final few kilometres ride to the section of cobblestones that Franco Ballerini went over just a few moments ago. But it really is a love-hate relationship that Franco Ballerini has had with Paris-Roubaix over these last few years. And you know, rumour has it that in his house he has a huge picture of Paris-Roubaix, and he looks at it every day, and all he thinks about is coming here for that one day in April.
Well, he's going to sleep good tonight, because he's going to have bookends on his sideboard back home now of 2 cobblestones, having won this race twice. Now, these two boys, I'm sure, are going to sprint it out because they've worked so well together. There's no team orders. The best man can get second, and the other one will have to take third. And Tafi, for my bet, is not going to be happy with third, but Peters is a strong finisher.
He certainly is. He's actually won a couple of races in the sprint in the past in his career, but at the moment he's just burying himself. I think he keeps looking over his shoulder because that chasing group with Frédéric Moncassin can't be too far behind. In fact, they've looked back several times now, so if they're not careful, they've got to make sure that they keep the speed high because they can still close it down, because they've got a lap of this track to do once they cross over the finish line, and that is still quite a long way to go before they reach the finish line.
Well, they come into the stadium here. They'll flick right onto the track itself. The showers, by the way, are just on the left there when they finished. And now the riders onto the track, and another enormous cheer from the crowd. As now, what are we going to be treated to here now? Peters or Taffy? Track riders they are not, but they know all about track finishes in Paris Roubaix. Peters is leading Taffy around, which says to me that Taffy is preparing for something special with 1 lap to go.
Certainly is, and they both look very happy. They're not too worried about second and third place. They know that Mappé has been the dominant team here this afternoon. Wilfred Peters still on the front, riding like a Trojan. He finished first in Wevelgem a couple of years ago, but I think today his performance in Paris-Roubaix will be one that he'll talk about for many years to come. Still, Wilfred Peters on the front, Andrea Taffy in second place, and the other group is coming onto the track right now.
And the gap already is 4 minutes as they start to wind up down the back straight now. Is Taffy going to have a go at Wilfred Peters, or is he going to leave it and just finish third again? There's the chase group. They're on the track as well now. 2 Gans versus 2 Rabobanks. And Backstead leading them out there, but Peters has sort of waved by Taffy. He said to Taffy, I think he's agreed he gets second actually because he got third last time. Taffy is second, Wilfred Peters is third. The Mappé 1, 2, 3 for the second time in just a couple of years.
Well, they certainly came to this race with a mission. It could well have been first 5 here as they come up to the line. It's going to be a very close sprint.
Moncassin is leading them out. He's not going to be happy at having to sprint for 4th place, but at least he'll want 4th place. But he's going to be challenged on the line, and Leon Van Bon takes it away from him. Van Bon, Moncassin, Sorensen is the order over the line, and the very, very brave Magnus Backstead comes in as well, and the gap is 4 minutes and 50 seconds. So that's a big winning gap for Ballerini. Well, Leon Van Bon, a medalist in the World Championships with his sprint last year, proving to be quite a developing bike rider now.
Certainly is, but look at the joy here. Andrea Taffy, they haven't started the sprint yet for second place, and still Gianluca Bortolami coming up here. A lot of points still at stake.
Well, Bortolami here now sprinting it out, and it looks as though he's going to be pipped right on the line. He is indeed by, I think it was Bart Lazen. Another Mappé boy in, and Henk Vogels in that sprint as well. So Vogels also got another great result out of this, because he really does like this event. He'll be a little sad to find out what happened to his 2 teammates, but they're right up there. So it looks as though Paul Sherwen is now down in the track centre. See if we can find him. Well, it looks as though Henk Vogels is not happy with something. He's crossed the line in 10th place, Henk, which I think is a great performance, but it's not satisfied Vogels today. So let's see if Paul Sherwen can find out exactly what was going on down there, because this young man is looking very, very frustrated. It's been a tough, tough day today. It is an event which he really likes, but 10th place on this occasion is not good enough.
Hey, another tough day for the GAN team. And again, the Mappé were the strongest, with Ballerini going away in the final.
Well, I saw Ballerini when I was still with him in the group, and he looked awesome. And so did Fred. But we had big Magnus Backstead there. I thought maybe, but it's a pity to see Fred get beaten. And the best man won, obviously, in Ballerini. I didn't have such a good day, but to finish in the first 10, I'm happy. 3 GAN riders in the first 10, I think that's an effort to be commended. But congratulations, Ballerini. And, well, 3 in the first 10. It won't be a party tonight, but I'm sure it's a great day for GAN anyway.
A really tough Paris-Roubaix today, though. The first time you've ridden it in these kind of conditions, how did it feel?
It sucked. It was really bad. I had back wheel slide, front wheel slide. Tristan Hoffman brought me down with 40k to go, and I finished, fell on my face. Took me 10 kilometres to get back. When I got back, I was knackered, but not to take away from the first 6 guys, they were strong, but I'm still happy.
Henk Vogel's telling us there how it was, but what about Magnus Backstead? I bet he's happy.
Magnus, that was your first experience with Paris Roubaix today. It's really something special.
Marvelous. I love this race. This is, yeah, I'm going to dedicate my life to this race, definitely.
It was very tough though, because you had a lot of GAN riders up there, but Mappé managed to work you over.
Yeah, they were too strong today. We couldn't do anything actually. It's just Ballerini just rode away from me. I was sitting on his wheel and he just rode away from me after a corner. It was a bit slippery, and yeah, that was it. And then they had Wilfried Peters and Tafi sitting on his wheel. So
I spoke to Henk Vogels after the finish, and he was devastated that Frederik Moncassin hadn't won. He thought that Fred was in a great day.
Fred looked pretty good, but I don't know what happened. He just didn't get around good enough for the on the stones. But I mean, it's a hard race. It's a lot of, you got to have a lot of luck just to be in the right place at the right time, and yeah, it's just a lot of luck and a lot of experience to be able to do this.
You also have to be very strong as well, and you showed today that you're an exceptionally strong man when it comes to riding this kind of race.
Well, yeah, I'm kind of good on flat riding, but I had a good day today, and I wanted to give Fred a chance to be up there for the win, and yeah, I tried my best, but I wasn't good enough today. But
happy with the top 10 place?
Definitely, this is more than I expected.
Well, a great ride it was too. In fact, Magnus taking 7th place in the end in his first Paris Roubaix. And 24th it was for Tom Steels, but what about Wilfried Peters?
A great demonstration by the Mappé team today.
Yeah, today was the same like 2 years before. I'm happy now in the first 3 place.
It seemed very sad actually at the end of the Arenberg Forest, because everyone was talking about Johan Museeuw. He went down with a crash, and then Zanini, and everyone thought that it was over for Mappé.
Yeah, we have very strong riders for this race. Every 8 the coming to the start was strong, and we lose in the Bos Valairs 2 best riders. We have also 6 other riders, and you see it in the finish.
Is it very special for a rider like you to come onto the stadium here, knowing that one of your teammates has already won the race?
Yeah, I was happy now when Ballerini was going, and me and Taffy was for 2nd and 3rd place, and you see the people here, it's unbelievable.
It was a Saturday though for George Hincapie.
George, it was a tough day for everybody out there in the forest today, and you looked very comfortable coming out of there.
Yeah, I was good in the beginning, first couple of sections, but after the forest I was in a break for a little while, and after that I just couldn't really recover, and I had bad legs after that. I don't know what was wrong, but I just didn't have it today.
It was a tough day for everybody, and even the Mappé lost most of their riders in the forest there. It seemed like absolute chaos.
Yeah, it was really hard. I just couldn't recover after the forest. You know, I was completely dead. I mean, completely dead. Last 100 kilometers took everything I had just to get to the finish. But another Roubaix.
A disappointed George Hincapie, who finished 66 with the scars of the battle there. What about Frankie Andreu?
Frankie, that was a hell of a Paris Roubaix today, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was just all out hard. I mean, I didn't have the great legs today, and today, I mean, any classic you got to have good legs to be able to do something, but it was just so slippery and muddy, and I mean, I crashed 3 or 4 times and flatted a couple times, but I probably was staying on the bike. It was one to remember, I guess.
Both you and George both looked very comfortable in the early sections of cobblestones. You were riding near the front, and it seemed to come apart towards the end.
Yeah, the critical part was the forest, and I mean, I could tell I was suffering a bit in the first part, and I knew it was going to be a long day. And then after the forest, I was just going and going and going, and it was too much. You know, I started wearing down. I couldn't stand the wheels anymore. And then George, yeah, ended up having some bad legs later on also. And so, in the last sections, he was really sorry. I stopped. I waited for him so we could come in together because it would have been a long day. But it was, I mean, yeah,
it's a tough race.
Surprised I finished.
It's a tough race. It always is. And what about that performance by Franco Ballerini, winning by 4 minutes?
Well, I mean, the way the conditions were, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, it's like if you could get off the front and just ride, the guys in the back can only go the same pace as the guy in the front, because you go any quicker, you're going to fall off. I mean, a lot of times when you hit the big mud sections, you just have to coast through them. You couldn't pedal because it was too slippery. So, I mean, Ballerini's a strong guy, and you know, I mean, you had to be strong to win, but time gap, not that big a deal. I mean, once you got the gap, you can only go so fast, you know, because it was deadly.
Deadly it was, but this man has a much nicer story to tell. Franco Ballerini winning again at the Paris Roubaix. He's done it twice now. He's going to remember this one because his winning margin was the biggest since Eddy Merckx won this event ahead of Roger de Vlaming back in 1970. So the Italian really did put an image on the Paris Roubaix this year, and I hope you've enjoyed this coverage of what has been a real classic in the making. He then had time to stop and see his teammates race home, Andrea Taffy getting second and Wilfred Peters taking the third place. A Mappy 1-2-3 on a day in the very early stages. They lost their two top men, supposedly so, Johan Museo and Zanini. This was the official result. The time for Ballerini just inside 7 hours, 6 hours, 55 minutes and 16 seconds. It wasn't a record. His average speed, a mere 38.5 kilometres an hour. That's 24 miles an hour over roads like we've seen over the last couple of hours of this videotape. We'll leave you now with some images of one of the great classics that we all had the pleasure to witness. For Paul Sherwen, I'm Phil Liggett saying goodbye.